The crash of metal against tile echoed through the corridor as retired Marine Colonel Derek Holloway hurled his medication cup across the hospital room. His voice, still commanding despite the IV lines threading through his arms, cut through the sterile air like a blade. Get this pretender out of my sight before her incompetence finishes what the enemy couldn't. The nurses froze. Security hesitated at the doorway. But Lauren Hayes, 31, slight-framed, with hands steadier than her racing pulse, didn't flinch. She'd faced worse than angry men in hospital gowns. What the decorated war hero didn't know was that the civilian nurse he'd just humiliated in front of the entire staff had once knelt in desert sand, covered in his soldiers' blood, fighting to keep them breathing as mortars rained down around her position. She turned to leave, but not before her eyes found the battalion number on his file. Her expression shifted just for a heartbeat before the professional mask returned. He'd recognize her eventually. They always did. Before we begin, I invite you to stay with me until the very end of this story. If it moves you, please like this video and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. The emergency department at Ridgecrest Veterans Medical Center smelled like every war zone Lauren Hayes had tried to forget. Antiseptic mixed with fear, the metallic tang of blood barely masked by industrial cleaners. She'd been pulling double shifts for 6 days straight, and the exhaustion pressed against her skull like a vice. "Hayes, we need you in trauma 2, Charge Nurse Rita Voss called from the station. "Multi-vehicle collision, 3 incoming." Lauren was already moving, muscle memory taking over. 12 years since she'd left the service. But her body still responded to crisis with the same cold efficiency that had kept soldiers alive in places whose names remained classified. The organized chaos of the trauma bay felt almost comforting. She worked alongside Dr. Marcus Webb, a former Army surgeon who never quite shook the military efficiency from his movements. They moved around each other like dancers who'd rehearsed the same routine 1,000 times. Male, 57, significant chest trauma. The paramedic rattled off vitals while they transferred the patient. BP's dropping, possible internal bleeding. Lauren's hands were already establishing additional IV access before the sentence finished. The next 2 hours blurred together, the way they always did when death hovered close enough to feel its breath on your neck. By the time they'd stabilized all 3 patients, her scrubs were spotted with blood and her shoulders ached. Rita met her at the sink where she was scrubbing her forearms raw. "You look like hell," Rita said, but her tone carried affection rather than criticism. "Feel worse?" Lauren dried her hands, rolling her neck to crack the tension. "Please tell me my shift's almost over." "About that." Rita's expression shifted to something apologetic. "We've got a situation on the ICU floor. Colonel Derek Holloway, decorated Marine, multiple tours, medical discharge 5 years ago. He's refusing treatment from half the staff, and Administrator Caldwell wants our most experienced trauma nurse up there." Lauren felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What's his condition?" "Post-surgical infection, but he's not cooperating with wound care. Pulled his lines twice, threw a tray at an orderly this morning. He's demanding military medical staff only. Says civilians don't understand protocol." Rita paused. "He specifically requested male veterans for his care team. So why send me?" "Because Caldwell thinks a firm hand might get through to him better than coddling, and because you're the best we have at dealing with difficult patients." Rita's eyes held a challenge. "Unless you want to tell me you can't handle one angry colonel." Pride was a stupid reason to accept an impossible assignment. Lauren knew that. She'd watched pride get people killed in places where the sun could melt the soles of your boots. "Fine. Give me his chart." 20 minutes later, Lauren stood outside room 417, reviewing Derek Holloway's medical history. Extensive combat record, 3 Purple Hearts, Silver Star for Valor in Kandahar. Medical discharge following injuries sustained during his final deployment. The details were vague in the civilian records, but she recognized the classification markers. Whatever had happened hadn't been declassified for public documentation. She knocked once and entered. The man in the bed looked like he was still fighting a war. His jaw was locked tight, eyes scanning the room with the hypervigilance of someone who'd learned that relaxation meant death. At 52, he was lean muscle and scar tissue, the kind of hardness that came from decades of turning body and mind into weapons. Colonel Holloway, I'm Lauren Hayes. I'll be taking over your care for this shift. His eyes raked over her, dismissive, cold. Where's Jenkins? He was supposed to be handling my case. Nurse Jenkins is off duty. I'm here to check your vitals and assess your surgical site. That's not going to work for me. His voice carried the absolute certainty of a man used to having orders followed without question. Get me Jenkins, or get me someone who's actually served. I don't need some civilian playing nurse with a hero's recovery. Lauren kept her expression neutral, though something sharp twisted in her chest. Your infection won't care about my military status, Colonel. Now, if you'll let me, I didn't ask for your opinion on what my infection cares about. He reached for the call button. Rita, get someone else up here. Someone who actually understands what service means. The intercom crackled. Colonel Holloway, Nurse Hayes is one of our most qualified. I don't care if she's got a medical degree from Harvard. She hasn't earned the right to touch me. His eyes found Lauren's again, and the contempt there was sharp enough to cut. No offense, sweetheart, but you don't know anything about what we go through, about sacrifice, about what it costs to serve. The familiar weight of her past pressed against Lauren's ribs. She could end this in seconds, roll up her sleeve, show him the ink that marked her as one of his own, watch his expression crumble into embarrassed apology. She'd done it before when pushed hard enough. But something about his absolute certainty, his crushing dismissal of her worth based purely on what he thought he saw, it ignited something colder than anger. You're right, Colonel. I don't know anything about sacrifice. She set his chart down carefully, her voice professionally distant. I'll have the charge nurse find someone more suitable for your care. She was at the door when he spoke again. And tell whoever takes over that I want my meds adjusted. The pain management protocol is inadequate. Whoever designed it clearly never experienced combat injuries. Lauren's hand tightened on the door handle, but she didn't turn around. I'll make note of it. The hallway felt too bright after the dimness of his room. She found Rita at the nurse's station, already pulling up the staffing schedule with a grimace. That bad? He wants a veteran. Lauren kept her voice level. Preferably male. Think we can accommodate him? Rita's expression hardened. We're understaffed as it is. We can't rearrange the entire ICU schedule because one patient has prejudices about who's qualified to check his blood pressure. He's not wrong, though, is he? The words came out sharper than Lauren intended. He served. He bled for this country. If having a veteran on his team helps him cooperate with treatment, that's not how this works, and you know it. Rita studied her face. What did he say to you? Nothing that matters. Lauren, I'm fine, just tired. She turned away before Rita could push further. Assign someone else. I've got charts to finish. She made it to the break room before the tremor started in her hands. 12 years. 12 years since she'd walked away from the uniform and everything that came with it. And one bitter colonel could still make her feel like that terrified 23-year-old medic who'd been convinced she wasn't strong enough, wasn't fast enough, wasn't good enough to save the people who needed her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Webb. Heard about Holloway. You okay? She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled up the hospital database and searched Derek Holloway's military records, the ones that required her veteran's access code to view. The details were sparse, heavily redacted, but the battalion number stood out like a flare in the darkness. 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. Helmand Province, 2014. Her breath caught. She'd been attached to that unit for 6 months. 6 months of hell that still woke her up at 3 a.m. with the taste of sand and blood in her mouth. She'd been Army then, a combat medic embedded with a Marine unit because casualties were running so high they needed every available medical personnel in the field. Lauren closed her eyes, and she was back there. The heat, the fear, the sound of her own voice screaming for more gauze, more plasma, more time. Young faces going pale beneath their tans while she worked with hands that never felt steady enough. She'd saved 37 soldiers during that deployment. She knew the number because she'd counted every single one during the sleepless nights after she'd come home. She'd lost 12. Derek Holloway had been the battalion commander. She'd seen him from a distance, had treated men who spoke his name with reverence and fear in equal measure. He'd been a presence rather than a person, the kind of leader who inspired absolute loyalty. She'd never spoken to him directly, just another faceless medic in the machinery of war. But she remembered the mission that had ended her deployment, the one that sent her home 3 months early with a medical discharge and nightmares that would take years to quiet, the one that still carried classified markers in her record. The break room door opened. Rita stuck her head in, her expression troubled. His fever's spiking. He's refusing antibiotics, says they're making him nauseous. Webb wants to adjust his protocol, but Holloway keeps pulling his IV. Lauren stood. Where's Stevens? Ken Stevens was their other veteran nurse, former Navy corpsman with 2 deployments under his belt. He called out sick. We're stretched thin tonight. Rita hesitated. I know he was awful to you, but I'll do it. The words came out before Lauren fully decided. But I need you to document every interaction. If this goes sideways, I want a paper trail. She found Derek thrashing against his sheets, face flushed with fever. His monitors screamed warnings that his body was losing the fight against infection. Colonel Holloway, she kept her voice calm, authoritative. Your fever is 103.2. We need to get fluids into you now. Get out. But his voice was weaker now, pain cutting through the anger. I told you people, what you told us was that you wanted to live long enough to keep insulting the staff. She was already pulling on gloves, checking his IV site. Your pride is going to kill you faster than any enemy soldier ever could. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Even weak with fever, his grip was iron. You don't talk to me about soldiers. You don't know what that word means. Their eyes met. For a moment, Lauren considered telling him, showing him, forcing him to see her. Instead, she carefully removed his hand from her wrist. You're right, Colonel. I'm just a civilian who's trying to keep you alive despite your best efforts to the contrary. Now let me do my job. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or respect for someone who wouldn't back down. But he released her and turned his head away, jaw still locked tight. She worked in silence, replacing his IV line, administering antibiotics, checking his surgical site. The wound was angry and red, infection spreading despite the aggressive treatment. He'd need surgical debridement soon if this didn't improve. The pain medication isn't working, he said finally, voice rough. Feels like my chest is being torn apart from the inside. That's the infection. She made notes on his chart. The surgery removed most of the damaged tissue, but your body's fighting hard to heal. It's going to hurt for a while. You talk like you know what surgical pain feels like. Most nurses have personal experience with medical procedures, Colonel. We're not immune to illness just because we treat it. He studied her through fever-bright eyes. You're different from the others. They flinch when I raise my voice. You just get quieter. Maybe I'm just too tired to flinch. A ghost of something, not quite a smile, crossed his face. How long have you been on shift? Long enough. That's against regulations. Tired nurses make mistakes. So do patients who refuse treatment. She hung his new IV bag. Your fever should start coming down in the next hour. Try to rest. She was at the door when his voice stopped her again. Hayes? She turned. You're still not what I asked for, but... He paused, clearly struggling with something. You don't quit. I respect that. It wasn't an apology. Wasn't even close to acknowledgement of how he'd treated her. But it was something. Get some sleep, Colonel. The night stretched long after that. Lauren checked on Derek every 30 minutes, documenting his gradual improvement as the antibiotics fought back the infection. By 4 a.m., his fever had dropped to 101.3. By 6, he was sleeping fitfully but peacefully. She was updating his chart when Administrator Richard Caldwell appeared at the nurse's station. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. A politician who'd somehow ended up running a hospital. Nurse Hayes, I heard you managed to stabilize Colonel Holloway. He responded well to the adjusted antibiotic protocol. Despite his, shall we say, difficult personality, Caldwell's smile widened. I appreciate your professionalism in handling such a challenging patient. Something in his tone set off warning bells. Just doing my job, sir. Of course. Though I should mention, the colonel has filed several complaints about his care here. Nothing actionable, but he's made it clear he finds our facility substandard compared to military medical centers. Caldwell straightened his tie. I trust you'll ensure he has no legitimate grounds for criticism during your shifts? The implication was clear. Keep the difficult veteran quiet or face consequences. I'll provide the same standard of care I give all patients, Lauren said carefully. Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Caldwell turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Hayes, try to avoid antagonizing him. We can't afford the publicity if a decorated war hero claims mistreatment at a VA hospital. He walked away before she could respond. Rita emerged from the supply room, having clearly overheard the exchange. That man makes my skin crawl, Rita muttered, acting like you're the problem when Holloway's been terrorizing staff for days. He's just covering the hospital's reputation. He's covering his own ass. There have been complaints about veteran care for months. Delayed treatments, inadequate pain management, staff shortages. Word is Caldwell's been burying the reports to make his numbers look good for the board. Rita lowered her voice. You didn't hear that from me. Lauren filed that information away. She'd seen enough bureaucratic corruption in the military to recognize it in civilian dress. Her shift ended at 7 a.m., but she stayed to brief the day nurse on Derek's condition. As she was gathering her things, Dr. Webb found her in the break room. You look exhausted. 36-hour shift will do that. Go home. Sleep. He hesitated. I read Holloway's military file, the classified sections. Lauren's hand stilled on her locker. And? 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, Helmand Province, 2014. Webb's voice was quiet. You were there. It wasn't a question. A lot of medical personnel rotated through that region. Not many embedded Army medics, especially not many who earned a Bronze Star for pulling wounded Marines out of a kill zone under active fire. He moved closer. He doesn't know, does he, that you were one of his unit's medics? There's no reason he would. I was just another soldier in the support staff. You saved lives, Lauren. You saved his men. And I lost others. The words came out harder than she intended. 12 soldiers died while I was working on them, Marcus. 12 people who trusted me to keep them alive long enough to see home again. So forgive me if I don't feel the need to announce my service record to every veteran who thinks I'm too soft to understand sacrifice. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Is that why you don't tell people about what you did over there? I tell people what they need to know. She shouldered her bag. The rest is just history. But as she drove home through the early morning light, she couldn't shake the image of Derek Holloway lying fevered and furious in his hospital bed, fighting demons she recognized all too well. She'd left that war behind years ago, changed her name after the discharge. Hayes had been her mother's maiden name, a way to separate her new life from the one that had broken her in the desert. The Army medic who'd served in Helmand Province existed only in classified files now. Lauren Hayes was just a nurse, nothing more. That's what she told herself as she finally fell into bed. That's what she tried to believe as exhaustion pulled her under. But the nightmares were waiting. They always were. The next 3 days followed a brutal rhythm. Derek's infection worsened despite aggressive treatment, his fever spiking and falling in unpredictable waves. He remained combative, refusing medications, pulling lines, verbally abusing anyone who entered his room. Lauren drew his care assignment each shift. Rita claimed it was coincidence, but Lauren suspected the charge nurse knew exactly what she was doing, putting the one person who wouldn't quit against the patient who wouldn't cooperate. You're back, Derek said when she entered on her 4th night. His voice was rough, weaker than before. Persistent, I'll give you that. Your fever's back up, 103.5. She didn't wait for permission before checking his IV site. We're going to need to run new cultures. More needle sticks, fantastic. But he didn't resist as she drew blood. You ever get tired of this? Dealing with assholes like me who don't appreciate what you do? Every day. He actually laughed, a harsh, painful sound. At least you're honest. Lying takes energy I don't have. She worked in silence for several minutes, her movements efficient and practiced. Derek watched her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. You don't talk much, he observed. Most medical staff, they fill the silence with chatter. Small talk. You just work. Would you prefer small talk? No. He shifted against his pillows, wincing. I prefer people who do their jobs without needing constant validation. Then we should get along fine. She was adjusting his monitors when his hand caught her wrist again, gentler this time. Hayes, she met his eyes. I was wrong about what I said when you first came in, about you not understanding. The words clearly cost him. You're good at this, better than most I've seen. It still wasn't an apology for the contempt, the dismissal, the casual cruelty, but his eyes held something that might have been respect. Thank you, Colonel. Derek, if you're going to keep me alive, you might as well use my name. It felt like a truce, a small one, fragile and temporary, but real nonetheless. The peace lasted exactly 2 more days. Lauren arrived for her shift on Thursday to find the ICU in chaos. Rita met her at the entrance, her face pale. Holloway's crashing. His infection hit his bloodstream. He's going septic. Webb's prepping for emergency surgery, but Holloway's refusing. He's demanding to be transferred to a military facility. How long until septic shock? Hours, maybe. He's deteriorating fast. Rita's voice dropped. Caldwell's in there now, trying to get him to sign consent forms. It's not going well. Lauren pushed into the room to find Derek barely conscious, his skin gray and slick with sweat. Caldwell stood by the bed with a tablet, his politician's smile firmly in place despite the crisis unfolding. Colonel Holloway, I understand your concerns, but we simply don't have time to arrange a transfer. The surgery needs to happen now. No. Derek's voice was barely audible. Not here. Not from people who can't. Can't what? Caldwell's patience was clearly wearing thin. Can't provide adequate medical care? I assure you our surgical team is highly qualified. You don't understand. Derek's eyes were unfocused, fever burning away coherence. They died. They all died, and I should have been faster, should have seen the trap. He was talking about the war now, trapped in memories that even pain couldn't suppress. Caldwell shot a frustrated look at Dr. Webb. Can we declare him incompetent and proceed without consent? He's delirious, but not legally incompetent, Webb said tightly. Not yet. Then we're wasting time, Caldwell turned to Lauren. Hayes, you've built rapport with him. Make him understand. Get out. Everyone turned to stare at Lauren. Excuse me? Caldwell's expression hardened. Everyone out. Now. She moved to Derek's bedside, her voice carrying an authority that made even the administrator hesitate. I need to talk to him alone. Nurse Hayes, this is highly irregular. Administrator Caldwell, you have 60 seconds to clear this room before I file a formal complaint about your interference with patient care. Your choice. The silence stretched tight. Then Webb nodded sharply. You heard her. Everyone out. Caldwell's face flushed with anger, but he moved toward the door. This conversation isn't over, Hayes. Noted. The door closed, leaving Lauren alone with the dying man in the bed. Derek's eyes found hers, recognition flickering through the fever haze. Hayes, you don't have to. Be quiet and listen. She pulled a chair close, her voice dropping to something low and steady. I know what you're seeing right now. I know where your mind is. And I know that whatever orders you gave, whatever decisions you made in that desert, they're eating you alive. His breath hitched. You can't know. Helmand Province, 2014, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. She watched his eyes widen. Mission codename Phantom Serpent. 17 casualties in a 6-hour firefight. That's what's haunting you, isn't it? How do you... His hand gripped the bed rail. Who are you? Lauren stood, her decision made. She reached for her sleeve and slowly rolled it up, revealing the ink she'd kept hidden for 12 years. The medical caduceus twisted with dog tags. Army Combat Medic Corps. Below it, barely visible through scar tissue, the names. 12 names in precise script. The soldiers she couldn't save. Derek stared at her arm, his face a mask of shock and dawning understanding. When he spoke, his voice cracked. You were there. You were one of our medics. I was the medic who worked on your men when they came in bleeding. I was the one who held them while they died because there wasn't enough time, wasn't enough blood, wasn't enough of anything to fix what the enemy had broken. Lauren met his eyes, and years of buried emotion finally broke through the professional mask. I was there in that godforsaken desert listening to boys who weren't old enough to drink legally tell me about their families back home while I tried to stop them from bleeding out on foreign soil. So yes, Colonel, Derek, I know exactly what sacrifice looks like. A tear tracked down Derek's cheek, the first crack in the armor he'd worn for decades. The mission, he whispered. It was my fault. I led them into an ambush. 5 men died because I missed the signs, because I... No. Lauren's voice was steel. You didn't lead them into anything. That mission was compromised before you ever rolled out. But that's not the part that's destroying you, is it? There's something else. Something about that day that they didn't put in the reports. Derek's hand found hers, gripping tight enough to hurt. How do you know about... Because I was there, she said quietly. And I've been carrying the same classified truth that you have. The difference is, I know what really happened. And Derek? She squeezed his hand back. It's time someone finally told you the truth about the day your men died. His monitor screamed as his heart rate spiked, not from deterioration, but from the weight of 12 years of guilt finally being challenged. Outside the door, she could hear the medical team gathering, ready to intervene. But Lauren didn't move. She kept her eyes locked on Derek's, her voice steady and certain. Those men didn't die because you failed them. They died saving you. And it's time you learned how. Derek's face crumbled, and for the first time since she'd met him, the decorated Marine colonel looked like what he really was. A broken man desperate for absolution. Tell me, he begged. Please. I need to know. Lauren took a breath, feeling the weight of classified secrets and buried truths pressing against her chest. The door burst open. Dr. Webb, Rita, 2 security guards drawn by the alarm. But Lauren didn't look away from Derek. Her next words would change everything. The mission logs were altered. The casualty report was incomplete. And the 5 men you think you killed? Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They knew about the ambush before you gave the order to advance. Someone told them. Someone made sure they'd be in position to intercept what was really waiting for your convoy. Derek's eyes went wide with shock. What are you talking about? Outside, more footsteps approached. More voices. Authority arriving to shut down whatever was happening in room 417. But Lauren had started this, and she'd finish it, no matter what came next. I'm talking about the fact that your men were murdered, Derek, and the person responsible has been covering it up for 12 years. The door slammed open fully. Administrator Caldwell stood framed in the entrance, his face purple with rage. Nurse Hayes, step away from that patient immediately. You're suspended. Effective now. Lauren didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on Derek's, and she saw the moment understanding crashed over him like a wave. He knew. Finally, after all these years, he knew something was wrong with the story he'd been told. Security, remove her, Caldwell ordered. But Derek's voice cut through the chaos. Weak, damaged, but carrying the absolute authority of a lifetime of command. Touch her, and I'll have you court-martialed for interfering with a military investigation. Everyone froze. Derek's hand tightened on Lauren's. This nurse stays. Everyone else gets out. Now. Colonel Holloway, you're in no condition. I said out. The force of his shout sent his monitors into alarm again, but his eyes blazed with something beyond fever. Hayes has information relevant to a classified military operation. That makes this room a secure zone. Civilians are dismissed. Caldwell's mouth worked soundlessly. Webb looked between Lauren and Derek, understanding dawning. Lauren, Webb said carefully, what is he talking about? She finally looked away from Derek to meet her colleague's eyes. I'm talking about the fact that 5 Marines didn't die in an ambush. They were assassinated. And someone in this hospital knows exactly who gave the order. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Caldwell stepped forward, his politician's mask finally cracking to reveal something cold underneath. You have no idea what you're interfering with, Hayes. No idea what you're risking by opening this door. Lauren smiled, sharp and dangerous. Try me. The words hung in the air like smoke after a grenade. Caldwell's face went through several shades of red before settling on something closer to marble, cold and impenetrable. You're making serious accusations, Nurse Hayes. Accusations that could end your career and open you up to legal action. His voice dropped to something that wasn't quite a threat, but lived in the same neighborhood. not to mention violating federal confidentiality laws regarding classified military operations. Lauren didn't blink. I'm not making accusations. I'm stating facts that Colonel Holloway has a right to know about his own men. Get out, Derek rasped from the bed, but he wasn't talking to her. His eyes were fixed on Caldwell with the kind of focus that came from years of identifying enemy combatants. Everyone who isn't military or medical personnel, out. That includes you, Administrator. This is my hospital, and this is a conversation about classified operations conducted under military jurisdiction. Derek's voice grew stronger despite the fever ravaging his body, which means you have exactly zero authority here. Dr. Webb stays because I'm actively dying and might need medical intervention. Hayes stays because she has information relevant to an ongoing investigation. You leave, or I make one phone call to the Pentagon and explain why a civilian administrator is obstructing a military matter. Caldwell's jaw worked silently. He glanced at the security guards, then at Webb, then back to Lauren. Something calculating moved behind his eyes, the look of a man reassessing the board before his next move. Fine, but this conversation will be documented. And Hayes, when this blows back on you, remember I gave you a chance to walk away. He turned sharply and strode out, the security guards trailing behind him like confused shadows. The door clicked shut. Rita had already slipped out during the confrontation, leaving just the three of them, Lauren, Derek, and Webb. Webb moved to Derek's monitors, checking vitals with practiced efficiency. Your heart rate is through the roof. Whatever you two need to discuss, make it fast. He needs surgery within the hour, or we're looking at organ failure. Then you better listen close, Lauren said quietly, because what I'm about to tell you changes everything about that day. Derek's hand found hers again, gripped desperate. The ambush. You said they knew. How could they have known? Lauren pulled the second chair closer and sat, her body remembering the weight of gear and fear, even though she wore nothing but scrubs now. The official report said your convoy was hit by an IED, followed by small arms fire from concealed positions. 5 Marines killed, 8 wounded. The investigation concluded it was bad luck, wrong place, wrong time, no intelligence failures. That's what they told me, Derek said hoarsely. That's what I've believed for 12 years. The report lied. She kept her voice steady, clinical, the way she'd learned to deliver bad news to families who would never see their sons again. 3 days before Phantom Serpent, I was ordered to attend a briefing I shouldn't have been at. Someone made an administrative error, added my name to a list meant for officers only. By the time they realized, I was already in the room. Webb had stopped adjusting monitors. He was listening now, completely still. There were 8 people in that briefing, Lauren continued. 4 officers, 2 intelligence analysts, me, and a civilian contractor named Victor Kane. He was there representing a private security firm that had been operating in the region for 6 months. Kane reported suspicious activity along the route your convoy was scheduled to take. Locals clearing out, increased radio chatter, the usual pre-attack indicators. Derek's eyes narrowed. I never received that intelligence. Because someone decided it wasn't credible enough to delay the mission. The operation was time-sensitive. You were supposed to link up with another unit for a joint patrol into a high-value target area. Delaying meant losing the window. Lauren's fingers tightened around his. But 5 members of your unit did receive the intelligence. Corporal James Rivera, Lance Corporal Marcus Tate, Private First Class David Wu, Sergeant Kyle Morrison, and Private Andrew Garrett. She watched Derek's face crumble as she spoke each name. These were ghosts he'd carried for over a decade. They were told to scout ahead, he whispered. Standard advance party. I ordered them forward myself. You ordered them based on normal tactical protocol. What you didn't know was that those 5 had been pulled aside by someone before the convoy rolled out. Someone who told them about the threat and said the best way to protect the unit was to trigger the ambush early, draw fire away from the main body. Webb swore quietly. That's not protocol. That's suicide. That's murder dressed up as sacrifice, Lauren corrected. Those men were told they'd have support, that air cover would be overhead, that quick reaction forces were standing by. They were lied to. Derek made a sound like something breaking inside him. They died instantly. The IED took out their vehicle before they could even call it in. By the time we reached them, I know. Lauren had to force the words past her throat. I was on the medevac bird that picked up what was left. I saw what that explosion did. Nobody could have survived it. But the rest of us made it through. The convoy took fire, but we had time to react to establish defensive positions. If they hadn't triggered that IED, Derek's eyes went distant, seeing something 12 years gone. We would have driven straight into it. The whole convoy. We'd have lost 30 men instead of 5. That's the story that's been told, Lauren said carefully. The narrative that makes their deaths heroic instead of suspicious. But here's what wasn't in the report. The IED that killed them wasn't positioned for the convoy route. It was positioned exactly where an advanced scout vehicle would stop to assess the terrain. Someone knew where they'd be. The silence that followed felt like the moment before detonation. Webb found his voice first. You're saying someone set them up. Someone wanted those specific Marines dead. Or someone wanted the ambush to fail without it looking deliberate. Lauren released Derek's hand and stood, pacing the small room because sitting still felt impossible. Think about it. The attack was supposed to devastate the convoy, take out leadership, scatter the unit, maybe capture high-value targets for propaganda. Instead, 5 men trip it early, and the whole thing falls apart. The insurgents are exposed, caught off guard, and your unit tears through them. 37 enemy combatants killed, Derek said hollowly. It was a decisive victory. We disrupted their entire operational capability in that sector for months. Exactly. Which makes you wonder, who benefited from that disruption? Webb shook his head slowly. This sounds like conspiracy theory territory. It would be, except I saw the classified after-action reports that never made it into the official record. Reports documenting that the insurgent cell we destroyed had been negotiating with a rival security contractor for protection payments. They were playing both sides, taking money from contractors while attacking military convoys. Someone was losing a lot of revenue because these insurgents couldn't be controlled. Derek's eyes snapped to hers. Kane's company. Kane's company, Lauren confirmed. Blackstone Security Solutions. They'd lost 3 contracts in the region because they couldn't guarantee safe passage. Rival firms were undercutting them by making deals with local cells, but if those cells got wiped out by a U.S. military operation, all those contracts would need new security providers, Webb finished. And Blackstone would be first in line, having demonstrated their superior intelligence capabilities. Except their intelligence was designed to get people killed. Lauren's voice went hard. 5 Marines died, so a private military contractor could eliminate business competition and look like heroes for warning us about the threat they probably helped orchestrate. Derek tried to sit up, failed, fell back against pillows soaked with sweat. That briefing you attended, who else was there? Who else knew about this? That's where it gets complicated. Lauren returned to his bedside. Of the 8 people in that room, 3 are dead. 2 died in subsequent combat operations within 6 months of Phantom Serpent. The third, one of the intelligence analysts, died in a car accident stateside 2 years later. Convenient. Very. Of the remaining 5, Kane disappeared after his contract ended. I've looked. The man might as well be a ghost. The other intelligence analyst transferred to a desk job at Langley and won't return my calls. One of the officers retired and refuses to discuss anything from that deployment. And the other 2? Webb asked. Lauren met Derek's eyes. You're looking at one of them. The other is now a hospital administrator who seems very interested in keeping this conversation from happening. The words landed like artillery. Derek's face went from fevered confusion to cold clarity in seconds. Caldwell was there. Caldwell was at that briefing. Captain Richard Caldwell, attached to JSOC for liaison coordination with civilian contractors in theater. Lauren had memorized every detail from the briefing roster. He's the one who presented Kane's intelligence to the group. He's the one who recommended the mission proceed on schedule despite the threat assessment. That son of a... Derek tried to sit up again, and this time Webb had to physically restrain him. Easy, Colonel. Your stitches can't handle righteous fury right now. But Derek wasn't listening. His eyes burned with something beyond fever, the cold rage of a commander who just learned his men were betrayed. Caldwell's been here the whole time. He's been managing my care, insisting on being involved in treatment decisions. I thought he was just an administrator covering his ass for liability purposes, but he was making sure you didn't remember. Lauren said quietly, making sure you stayed confused and compliant. Your medical records show he personally approved your pain medication protocol, which just happens to include drugs known for causing memory issues and confusion in patients with your neurological history. Webb pulled out his tablet and started scrolling through files. She's right. Holloway, you've been on a medication cocktail that would fog anyone's cognitive function. I questioned it when I first saw your chart. It's not standard for your condition. But Caldwell said it came from your previous physicians, and I didn't push back. How long have I been on this protocol? Derek's voice was dangerous. Since admission, 5 days. And before I started the meds, was I showing any signs of confusion or memory issues? Webb reviewed the intake notes, and his expression darkened. No. You were alert, oriented, and, according to the ER physician, difficult but cognitively intact. The confusion started after Caldwell adjusted your medications. Lauren watched Derek process this information. She could almost see the moment his military training overrode his civilian confusion, the shift from patient to commander. He's been drugging me to keep me quiet about what I might remember from that deployment. Derek's hands clenched into fists. But why now? Why after 12 years would he suddenly be worried about me putting pieces together? Because you're not the only veteran from that battalion who's been admitted to this hospital recently, Lauren said. She'd been digging through records for the past 3 days, using her veterans' access to pull files that civilian staff wouldn't think to connect. In the last 8 months, 6 veterans from 3rd Battalion have received treatment here. 3 were your Marines from that deployment. All 3 were placed on similar medication protocols. All 3 were managed directly by Caldwell. And all 3, she couldn't finish the sentence. Webb did it for her. All 3 died here. Post-surgical complications in 2 cases, adverse medication reaction in the 3rd. He was scrolling faster now, pulling up files. Jesus. The death rate for veterans from that specific unit is nearly 3 times higher than our hospital average. Derek's face went gray. He's killing them. Caldwell is systematically murdering anyone who might remember that briefing or connect him to what happened. Not just him, Lauren corrected. This requires more than one person. Someone's been altering records, adjusting treatment protocols, making sure the right patients end up on the wrong medications. Someone with access to medical files and enough authority that their changes don't raise flags. How many people at this hospital would have that kind of access? Webb asked. Besides Caldwell? Maybe 3 or 4 senior administrators, the head of pharmacy, and… Lauren stopped. Her mind caught on something she'd noticed days ago, but hadn't wanted to examine too closely. The chief of medical records, Patricia Donovan. She transferred here from Walter Reed 2 years ago. Before that, she worked at Blackstone Security Solutions, Webb read from his screen, having pulled up her employment history. She was their medical coordinator for contract personnel overseas. She would have had access to all their operational data. The room felt like it was shrinking. Lauren forced herself to breathe through the rising panic. This was bigger than 5 dead Marines. This was institutional corruption that reached deep into the civilian healthcare system that was supposed to protect veterans. We need evidence, Derek said, his voice steadying even as his body weakened. Hard evidence that will stand up to scrutiny. Military records, hospital files, witness testimony. Everything documented and bulletproof before we take this to anyone who might be compromised. You need surgery, Webb countered. Your infection won't wait for an investigation. Then do it fast and keep me alive long enough to see this through. Derek turned to Lauren. You have copies of the classified briefing documents? Not exactly. I have notes from memory and some verification through unofficial channels. The actual files are sealed under national security protocols. I'd need someone with significantly higher clearance to access them. I can get them. Derek's eyes were clearer now, focus cutting through the fog of fever and drugs. I still have contacts at the Pentagon, people who owe me favors, but I need to make the calls before Caldwell realizes we're onto him and starts covering tracks. He already knows something's wrong, Lauren pointed out. You threw him out of the room and all but accused him of obstruction. Which means we have maybe an hour before he decides we're too dangerous to leave alive. Derek looked at Webb. How fast can you prep me for surgery? 20 minutes if I push it. But Holloway, you're in no condition. I've operated on less sleep with worse odds. Just do it. Derek grabbed Lauren's wrist again, and this time his grip was steady despite everything. "I need you to do something for me, something that might get you killed if Caldwell figures it out." Lauren should have been afraid. Should have been thinking about her career, her safety, all the sensible reasons to walk away from a conspiracy that had already left multiple bodies in its wake. Instead, she felt the old combat calm settle over her like armor. "Tell me what you need." Derek gave her an address and a name, someone who could be trusted, someone who existed outside the usual military channels. "He'll know what to do with the information, but you have to get it to him in person. No phones, no emails, nothing electronic that can be traced. I'm on shift for another 3 hours. Then make an excuse and leave. Tell them you're sick. Tell them anything. Just get out of this hospital before—" The door burst open without warning. Not Caldwell this time. 2 men in suits that screamed federal authority. Behind them, hospital security and 2 police officers in uniform. "Lauren Hayes?" The lead suit held up credentials too fast to read properly. "I'm Agent Brenner, FBI. You're going to need to come with us for questioning regarding allegations of breaching classified information protocols." Lauren's blood went cold. Webb moved between her and the door instinctively. "On whose authority?" Derek demanded. "Hospital administration filed a complaint stating that Nurse Hayes has been discussing classified military operations in violation of federal law. We're here to determine the validity of those claims." Brenner's expression was professional and utterly unreadable. "Ma'am, if you'll come quietly, this doesn't have to become a scene." "She's not going anywhere without legal representation," Webb said firmly. "She's not under arrest. Yet. This is voluntary questioning." "Then she volunteers to decline." Webb crossed his arms. Brenner sighed like this was all very tiresome. "We can do this the easy way, or we can get a warrant. Either way, she's coming in for questioning. The only variable is whether she loses her job and nursing license in the process." Lauren met Derek's eyes. He gave her the smallest shake of his head, a warning. If she went with them, she might not come back, or she'd come back with charges filed that would bury any chance of exposing what really happened. But if she refused, they'd know for certain she was a threat. "I'll go," she said quietly, "but I want everything documented. Every question, every statement, and I want to know exactly who filed this complaint." Hospital Administrator Richard Caldwell, on behalf of Ridgecrest Veterans Medical Center. Brenner gestured toward the door. "After you, Ms. Hayes." She let them lead her out, but not before catching the look on Derek's face. He was already planning something. She could see it in the way his jaw set, the way his eyes tracked every person in the hallway as they passed. The FBI agents walked her through the hospital like a perp walk designed for maximum visibility. Staff stopped and stared. Whispers followed in their wake. By the time they reached the elevator, everyone would know that Lauren Hayes had been taken in for questioning. Her reputation, everything she'd built in 12 years of keeping her head down and her past buried, was gone. They put her in an unmarked car. The younger agent drove while Brenner sat in back with her, maintaining professional distance but positioning himself to block any exit. "For what it's worth," Brenner said as they pulled out of the parking lot, "Caldwell seemed very eager to have you removed from the premises. Man practically wrote our warrant request for us." Lauren said nothing. Anything she said could be used against her later. "Smart. Lawyer up, stay quiet. That's what I'd do." Brenner pulled out a tablet and started scrolling through files. "Your service record is interesting reading. Army combat medic, embedded with Marine units, Bronze Star for Valor, medical discharge following classified operations in Helmand Province. You were attached to 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines during some of their heaviest fighting." Still, Lauren stayed silent. "Colonel Derek Holloway commanded that battalion. He's currently your patient. That's quite a coincidence." Brenner's tone suggested he didn't believe in coincidences. "Want to tell me what you two were really discussing in that room?" "I want a lawyer." "That's your right. But here's the thing. Lawyers take time. Filing paperwork takes time. And while we're processing your request and waiting for representation, Colonel Holloway is back at that hospital under the care of the same administrator who just filed charges against you. Makes you wonder what might happen to a difficult patient with no one watching his back." The threat was clear. Lauren's stomach turned over. "Are you suggesting something might happen to a patient in federal custody?" "I'm suggesting that hospitals are dangerous places. Infections happen. Medications get mixed up. People die. Brenner leaned forward slightly. But you already know that, don't you? Because you've been digging through records, looking at patterns, connecting dots that someone worked very hard to keep separated. Lauren's mind raced. Was Brenner part of the conspiracy, or was he investigating it? If you're trying to get information from me, you're going about it wrong, she said carefully. I'm trying to keep you alive long enough to testify. Brenner's voice dropped to something quieter. You're not the first person to notice suspicious patterns at Ridgecrest, but you might be the first one still breathing who can articulate what those patterns mean. The car took a turn that didn't lead toward any FBI field office Lauren knew about. The younger agent met Brenner's eyes in the rearview mirror, some kind of silent communication that made her pulse spike. Where are we going? Somewhere we can talk without hospital administrators listening through walls. Brenner closed his tablet. Ms. Hayes, I'm going to be straight with you because we don't have time for games. The FBI has had an open investigation into Ridgecrest Veterans Medical Center for 6 months. We've been tracking unusual mortality rates, medication irregularities, and financial connections to private military contractors. What we haven't had is someone on the inside willing to testify. Until now. Until you decided to confront a retired military officer about classified operations in a room full of witnesses. Brenner almost smiled. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Jury's still out on which. Fair enough? He pulled out a different tablet, this one showing surveillance photos of Caldwell meeting with people Lauren didn't recognize. Richard Caldwell has received over $2 million in payments from shell companies connected to Blackstone Security Solutions over the past 3 years. Patricia Donovan has received similar amounts. They're not alone. We've identified at least 6 staff members at Ridgecrest who are on Blackstone's payroll while working in positions that give them access to veteran medical records. Lauren studied the photos. You already know everything I was going to tell you. We know the what. We don't know the why. And we sure as hell don't know the how. How they're identifying targets. How they're coordinating kills that look like medical complications. How they're covering their tracks so thoroughly that it's taken us half a year to build even circumstantial cases. Brenner fixed her with a look that was equal parts respect and desperation. But you know, because you lived it. You were there when it started. The car pulled into an empty parking garage. The driver killed the engine and both agents turned to face her. We need your testimony, Brenner said. We need you to testify about Phantom Serpent, about the briefing, about what you've observed at the hospital. We need you to connect the historical conspiracy to the current murders. And we need you to do it knowing that the people you're testifying against have already killed at least 8 people that we know of to keep this quiet. 8? Lauren's voice came out hoarse. You said 6 veterans at the hospital. 6 that died at Ridgecrest. 2 more died in apparent accidents after being discharged. Both were Marines from 3rd Battalion. Both had been asking questions about Phantom Serpent. Brenner let that sink in. This isn't just about covering up a 12-year-old crime. This is about eliminating anyone who might remember enough to piece together what really happened. Lauren thought about Derek, fevered and weakening, trapped in a hospital bed under the care of people who wanted him dead. She thought about the 5 Marines whose names were carved into her flesh. She thought about 12 years of running from the past, of hiding who she was, of building a new life on the foundation of buried trauma. If I testify, I'm dead. If you don't testify, you're dead anyway, and so is Colonel Holloway. Brenner's expression was grim. They know you know. Caldwell's complaint wasn't just about getting you out of the hospital. It was about putting you somewhere he could control the narrative. He probably expected us to hold you for 72 hours while he cleaned up loose ends. Instead, we're offering you witness protection and a chance to stop these people before they kill again. What about Derek? We'll move him to a secure facility as soon as his surgery's complete. But we need your statement first. We need grounds for a warrant to seize records and make arrests. Lauren closed her eyes. She was so tired. Tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of watching people suffer because she'd been too afraid to speak up about what she'd witnessed. I'll do it, she said. I'll testify. But I have conditions. Name them. Derek Holloway gets full protection. So does Dr. Marcus Webb. He's too close to this now, they'll come after him next. And I want immunity for any classified information I'm about to disclose. I'm not going to prison for breaching national security because I'm exposing war crimes. Brenner pulled out his phone and made a call. Spoke to someone in clipped, efficient tones. Hung up. Done. We'll have the paperwork ready within the hour. He opened the car door. Welcome to the most dangerous decision of your life, Ms. Hayes. Try not to get killed before the grand jury convenes. They moved her to a safe house on the outskirts of the city, a nondescript apartment in a complex full of college students who wouldn't notice one more anonymous face. 2 agents stationed outside, 2 more in the apartment above. Brenner stayed with her, recording her statement with meticulous attention to detail. She told him everything. The briefing, the names, the suspicious deaths, the medication protocols. She described Victor Kane and his vanishing act. She explained how Caldwell's presence at Ridgecrest wasn't coincidence but calculated positioning, close to victims, able to control investigations, positioned to identify and eliminate anyone who might remember too much. Hours passed. The sun set outside windows covered with blinds that stayed permanently closed. Someone brought food that Lauren couldn't eat. Her phone had been confiscated. No outside contact until the investigation concluded. She was describing the roster from the Phantom Serpent briefing when Brenner's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression went carefully blank. What? Lauren asked. Colonel Holloway went into surgery an hour ago. Dr. Webb is operating. Brenner set his phone down slowly. There's been a complication. Lauren's blood turned to ice. What kind of complication? The kind where someone accidentally administered the wrong anesthetic dosage and Holloway went into cardiac arrest on the table. Brenner was already moving, grabbing his jet jacket. Webb got his heart started again, but it's touch and go. It wasn't an accident. No, it wasn't. Brenner looked at her with something like apology. They're moving faster than we anticipated. We need to accelerate the timeline. I need to go back there. I need to make sure Derek... You need to stay alive long enough to testify. That's the only way any of this matters. Brenner headed for the door. I'll have agents secure the operating room. Webb knows the situation now. He'll keep Holloway alive. And if he can't? Brenner didn't answer. The door closed behind him, and Lauren was alone with 2 silent agents who wouldn't meet her eyes. She paced the apartment like a caged animal. Every instinct screamed at her to run back to the hospital, to stand guard over Derek herself, to make sure the men who'd betrayed him 12 years ago didn't finish the job now. But she was trapped, protected and imprisoned in equal measure. Her mind kept circling back to one question. If they were willing to try killing Derek in the middle of surgery, in front of witnesses, what did that mean for everyone else? Webb was exposed now. Rita and the other nurses who'd seen too much, even the patients on Derek's floor who might have overheard something. How many people would Caldwell sacrifice to keep this buried? The night stretched eternal. Lauren gave up trying to sleep and instead went through everything she remembered from Helmand Province, writing it all down in detail that made her hands shake. Names, dates, conversations overheard in tents and aid stations, the faces of young men who'd trusted her to save them, the weight of dog tags collected from bodies too damaged to salvage. She was documenting the aftermath of Phantom Serpent when her phone, the new one Brenner had given her, supposedly secure, buzzed with a message from an unknown number. They're coming for the witnesses. Webb is missing. Get out now. Lauren's heart stopped. She showed the message to the agent stationed inside with her. Could be a trap, the female agent said, trying to flush you into the open. Or it's legitimate and we're sitting here while people die. Lauren was already pulling on her shoes. I'm not hiding while Caldwell eliminates everyone who knows the truth. You leave this apartment, you're outside our protection. Then I guess I'm outside your protection. She made it to the door before the female agent grabbed her arm, but the grip wasn't restraining, it was supportive. Give me 30 seconds to call this in and get backup authorization. Then we move together. The agent was already on her radio. You're right about one thing. If they're taking out witnesses, sitting here makes us reactive instead of proactive. The 30 seconds felt like 30 years. Then they were moving. Lauren flanked by 2 agents, a third driving while maintaining constant communication with someone at FBI headquarters. The hospital loomed ahead, lit up against the night sky like a beacon. Or a target. They entered through a side entrance, avoiding main security. The agents had badges that opened doors civilians couldn't access. They moved fast through empty corridors, heading for the ICU floor, where Derek would be recovering or dying from his surgery. The ICU was chaos. Nurses rushing between rooms, doctors shouting orders, monitors screaming. Lauren grabbed Rita by the arm as she hurried past. What happened? Multiple patients went into distress simultaneously, 6 code blues in 20 minutes. We're triaging as fast as we can, but Rita's eyes were wild with panic. Someone tampered with the medication dispensary. Wrong drugs are labeled as right ones. We don't know who got what anymore. Where's Dr. Webb? He never came out of surgery. Last I heard, Holloway was stable, but Webb went to check something in the pharmacy and just disappeared. Lauren's stomach dropped. She turned to the agents. They're creating chaos to cover eliminations. Webb found something or saw something, and they grabbed him before he could tell anyone. Pharmacy's in the basement, the male agent said. Let's move. They took the stairs because elevators were death traps. The basement corridor was dimly lit and too quiet after the chaos above. Lauren's feet made no sound on the linoleum. Years of moving through combat zones had taught her how to become a ghost when necessary. The pharmacy door stood open. Inside, someone had torn through filing cabinets and dumped medications across the floor. The computer terminal was smashed and written in what looked like marker on the wall above the chaos. Stop looking or more people die. Well, the female agent said quietly, at least they're not being subtle anymore. A sound from the back storage room made everyone freeze. The agents moved first, weapons drawn, advancing with practiced efficiency. Lauren followed because standing still felt like surrender. They found Dr. Marcus Webb tied to a chair, duct tape over his mouth, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. But alive, conscious, and furious. The agents cleared the room and cut him free while Lauren checked his injuries. The head wound was superficial, but he'd been roughed up, bruises forming on his ribs where someone had used him as a punching bag. How many? Webb gasped as soon as the tape came off. How many what? How many patients did they kill upstairs? I heard the codes going off before they grabbed me. We don't know yet. Rita said 6 code blues. Webb's expression shattered. 6. 6 people are dead or dying because I figured out what they were doing. What did you figure out? He gestured at the destroyed pharmacy with shaking hands. Caldwell and Donovan have been switching medications for weeks. Not just painkillers, antibiotics, blood pressure meds, anticoagulants. Any veteran from that battalion who came through here got a cocktail designed to look like medical complications when it was really systematic poisoning. I found the records, found the pattern, and I was about to copy everything when security grabbed me. Where are the records now? Gone. They wiped the computers remotely while I was tied up down here. Webb met her eyes. But I already sent copies to someone outside the hospital. Someone Holloway told me to contact if things went sideways. Lauren felt something loosen in her chest. He's alive? Derek made it through surgery? Barely. Someone tried to sabotage the anesthesia, but I caught it in time. Switched out the drugs before they could kill him. Webb touched his bleeding head. That's probably why they decided I knew too much. The female agent's radio crackled. Her expression changed as she listened to whatever was coming through. We need to move, now. Local PD just got a call about an active shooter situation in the ICU. It's fake, but it's bringing every cop in the city to this location. They're creating a diversion, Lauren said. Something big enough to cover whatever they're really doing. Or they're trying to trap us here while they eliminate their primary target. The agent was already pulling Webb to his feet. Where's Holloway's room? 4th floor, room 417. But if they're creating chaos, Lauren was already running. She took the stairs 3 at a time, legs burning, lungs screaming. Behind her, the agents and Webb struggled to keep up. Above, she could hear sirens approaching. The perfect cover for murder dressed as catastrophe. She hit the 4th floor door at full speed and stumbled into a nightmare. The hallway was empty. Every patient room door stood open. No nurses, no doctors, no staff anywhere. Just silence broken by the steady beep of abandoned monitors. Room 417's door hung wider than the others. Lauren forced herself to slow down, to approach tactically the way she'd been trained a lifetime ago. The agents flanked her, weapons ready. Inside, Derek's bed was empty. Fresh blood on the sheets. IV lines torn out and dripping onto the floor. The window stood open, 4 stories up, curtains billowing in the night breeze. Lauren's heart stopped. Then she heard it, a sound from the bathroom. Someone breathing hard, trying to stay quiet. She moved fast, shoving the door open to find Derek Holloway standing with his back against the sink, hospital gown soaked in blood, holding a scalpel in his shaking hand like a knife. His eyes were wild but focused. When he saw her, something like relief crossed his face. "They came for me," he rasped. "2 men. Said they were transferring me to another facility. But I saw the syringes and I—" He gestured at the bathroom door, which was barricaded with a shower chair. "I locked myself in here and I've been waiting for them to break through or for someone to rescue me, whichever came first." "You're bleeding." "Tore my stitches getting away from them. But I'm alive." His eyes found the agents behind her. "Please tell me you're the good guys." "FBI," the male agent confirmed. "And we're getting you out of here before whoever tried to kill you realizes you're still breathing." They moved as a unit, Derek supported between Webb and Lauren, the agents providing cover. The hospital had descended into complete chaos now. Police flooded the main entrance, responding to the fake active shooter call. Staff ran in every direction, patients called out from rooms. Perfect cover for extracting one supposedly dead colonel. They made it to the parking garage without incident. The female agent had already called for a secure transport. 2 minutes. Just hold position for 2 minutes. That's when the elevator doors opened and Richard Caldwell stepped out, flanked by hospital security. He saw them and his politician's mask finally dropped completely. What remained was cold calculation and barely restrained fury. "You should have stayed down," he said, looking directly at Derek. "All of you should have learned when to stop digging." Funny," Derek replied, leaning heavily on Lauren but keeping his voice steady. "I was about to say the same thing to you, except I'm not the one who's about to spend the rest of my life in federal prison." Caldwell smiled, sharp and dangerous. "Prison requires conviction. Conviction requires witnesses." He gestured and the security guards moved forward. "Stop right there," the female agent warned, weapon raised. But Caldwell wasn't looking at the agents. He was looking at something behind them. Lauren turned in time to see 3 more men emerging from the stairwell, not hospital security. Private military contractors with the kind of cold efficiency that came from actual combat experience. They were outgunned and surrounded in an empty parking garage with a bleeding patient and no backup. Caldwell's smile widened. "The problem with federal agents is they have rules. Blackstone doesn't. Neither do I. Not anymore." He checked his watch like this was just another appointment. "You have 1 chance to walk away from this. Give me Holloway and the medical records. Disappear, and I'll ensure you live to see tomorrow." "That's not going to happen," Brenner said, appearing from behind a concrete pillar with 6 more agents. Their weapons were trained on the contractors with absolute precision. "But I appreciate you gathering all the main conspirators in one place. Makes the arrest warrants much easier to serve." Caldwell's expression finally cracked. For the first time, Lauren saw real fear move behind his eyes. "You can't arrest me. I have immunity from who? Victor Kane. Because we arrested him 3 hours ago at a private airfield trying to flee the country." Brenner moved forward slowly. "He's already started talking, Caldwell. Already giving up names and dates and account numbers. Whatever protection you thought you had, it's gone." The standoff held for a moment that felt eternal. Then one of the contractors lowered his weapon, smart enough to recognize when the game was lost. The others followed. Security guards backed away with hands raised. Caldwell stood alone, his empire collapsing around him in real time. "This won't stick," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "You don't have evidence. Just the testimony of a confused veteran and a disgraced nurse who violated classified—" "We have everything," Webb interrupted. "Every medication record, every altered file, every payment from Blackstone. I sent it all to the Pentagon Inspector General 3 hours before you grabbed me. It's over." Caldwell's face went gray. He looked at Lauren with something almost like respect mixed with hatred. "You should have stayed invisible. Should have kept being the quiet little nurse who never caused problems." His voice turned bitter. "Instead, you had to play hero. You had to dig up the past." "The past never stays buried," Lauren said quietly. "Not when it's built on murdered soldiers and covered in their blood." Agents moved in to make arrests. Caldwell was handcuffed and read his rights while he stood silent, all the fight draining out of him like water from a broken vessel. Lauren sagged against Derek, adrenaline crash hitting hard. He kept her upright with an arm that trembled from exhaustion and pain. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually did it." "We survived," she corrected. "The rest is just beginning." But as agents led Caldwell away and medics rushed forward to assess Derek's condition and chaos continued swirling around them, Lauren felt something she hadn't felt in 12 years. The weight of the past finally beginning to lift. Not gone, never truly gone, but lighter, manageable. A burden that could be carried instead of one that crushed. Derek squeezed her hand. "Thank you for everything, for not walking away when you could have." "Marines don't leave Marines behind," she said, "even when they're wearing different uniforms." Then Webb was there, taking Derek's other arm, and they were moving toward an ambulance. Lights and sirens and shouted orders. The machinery of justice beginning to turn. Lauren looked back once at the hospital rising behind them, the place where veterans had come seeking help and found death instead. Where conspiracy and corruption had hidden behind the white walls of healing. Not anymore. As they loaded Derek into the ambulance, his phone, somehow still in his possession, buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted to something Lauren couldn't read. "What?" she asked. Derek showed her the screen. A message from a number that should have been disconnected. From a man who was supposed to be dead. "Victor Kane is not in custody. He's coming for all of you. This isn't over." Lauren's blood turned to ice as Derek met her eyes. "That's impossible," Webb said, reading over their shoulders. "Brenner said Kane was arrested hours ago at the airfield." "Unless Brenner lied," Derek said slowly. "Unless this goes deeper than even we thought. Unless Kane's been playing both sides this entire time, and we just fell for the biggest misdirection of all." Lauren turned to find Agent Brenner, but he was already gone. Disappeared into the chaos of arrests and investigations and crime scenes being processed. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the hospital's reach, Victor Kane was alive, free, and coming for them with 12 years of secrets to protect, and nothing left to lose. Lauren's fingers tightened on Derek's phone hard enough that the screen protested under her grip. The parking garage suddenly felt exposed. Too many shadows, too many concrete pillars that could hide a shooter, too many exit points that Kane could use. "We need to move," she said, already scanning for threats the way her combat training had taught her. "Now." But Webb was staring at the agents processing Caldwell with dawning horror. If Brenner lied about Kane being in custody, what else did he lie about? Who else is compromised? Derek tried to stand on his own and failed, his legs buckling as blood soaked through fresh bandages. Lauren caught him before he hit the ground. His skin was cold and clammy, shock setting in hard. "Ambulance," she said to the nearest paramedic. "He needs immediate transport." "Ma'am, we're waiting for clearance from the FBI." "He's bleeding out. Clearance doesn't matter if he's dead." She used the voice that had once commanded 19-year-old soldiers in firefights. The paramedic moved. They loaded Derek onto a gurney while Lauren kept her body between him and the rest of the garage. Webb pressed gauze against Derek's reopened surgical site with hands that had steadied through 100 operations but now trembled. "Where's Brenner?" Derek managed through gritted teeth. "Someone find Brenner." But the agent who'd orchestrated their entire rescue had vanished like smoke. The remaining FBI personnel were processing arrests, securing evidence, coordinating with local police, but none of them had eyes on their lead investigator. A younger agent approached, his face uncertain. "Agent Brenner said he was pursuing a lead. Left about 5 minutes ago. Didn't say where." 5 minutes. Lauren's combat instincts screamed warnings. Right after Derek got that message. That's not coincidence. "You think Brenner's working with Kane?" Webb asked quietly. "I think we don't know who to trust anymore." She turned to the young agent. "I need your supervisor, highest-ranking person on scene right now." He pointed toward a woman in her 50s coordinating the arrest processing. Special Agent Sarah Ortega. Her badge said she ran the Violent Crimes Division. Lauren approached with Derek's phone held like evidence. "Agent Ortega, we have a situation." Ortega listened to the explanation without interrupting, her expression darkening with each word. When Lauren finished, she made 2 phone calls in rapid succession, one to FBI headquarters, one to someone whose name she didn't speak aloud. Kane's file shows him arrested at 1800 hours at a private airfield outside the city, Ortega said, scrolling through her tablet. Brenner filed the report personally, but if you're saying Kane just sent a message, then either the arrest was fabricated or someone else is using Kane's phone. Derek had been fitted with temporary IV fluids, and his color was improving marginally. Either way, Brenner played us. Or Brenner's been compromised. Ortega's jaw set in a hard line. Kane has resources we don't fully understand. Blackstone Security had contracts in 40 countries. They've got money, connections, and 12 years of practice making problems disappear. So what do we do? Webb asked. Sit here waiting for Kane to pick us off one by one? We move you to a secure federal facility under guard. You testify before a grand jury tomorrow morning. We lock down everyone involved before Kane can regroup. Ortega gestured to 2 agents. Full protective detail. No one gets close to these witnesses without my personal authorization. It sounded solid, professional, exactly what should happen in a situation like this. Lauren didn't trust it for a second. How long until the transport? She asked. 15 minutes. We're pulling vehicles from... The lights in the parking garage died. Emergency systems kicked in after 2 seconds that felt like hours, bathing everything in dim red illumination that turned the concrete space into something from a horror film. Ortega's radio erupted with chatter, reports of a power failure affecting the entire hospital block. That's not a coincidence either, Derek said, trying to sit up despite the IV lines. Kane's making his move, or creating chaos so we can't tell his move from the general panic. Ortega had her weapon drawn, scanning the garage. Everyone stay close. We're not waiting for transport. We go now, on foot if necessary. They formed a protective circle around Derek's gurney. 6 agents, 2 paramedics, Lauren, Webb, and Ortega. They moved toward the exit ramp at a pace that balanced speed with tactical caution. That's when the first shot rang out. The bullet hit concrete 2 feet from Derek's head, and everyone scattered. Training took over. Agents returned fire while medics dragged the gurney behind a concrete pillar. Lauren dropped flat and crawled to Derek, her body automatically covering his, while her mind cataloged the shooter's position from the sound. Southeast corner, 2nd level, she called out. Single shooter, rifle by the sound. How the hell do you know that? One of the agents demanded. Because I've been shot at by enough rifles to recognize the acoustic signature. She kept her voice calm despite her racing pulse. And that's not military grade. That's civilian hunting rifle, which means Kane either ran out of time to source better weapons or he's using whatever was available. Or he wants us to think he's improvising, Ortega countered, already directing agents to flank the shooter's position. More shots. Methodical, precise, forcing them to stay pinned while someone, or multiple someones, moved into position for a better angle. Lauren recognized the tactic. It was textbook combat suppression. He's not alone, she said. This is a coordinated assault. He's got at least 3 people working positions. Derek grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who'd been at death's door. You need to get clear. Take Webb and go. Not happening. Lauren, listen to me. I've had this argument before with people who thought I should run instead of fight. They were wrong then too. She met his eyes. Besides, you still owe me an apology for calling me an incompetent civilian who doesn't understand sacrifice. Despite everything, Derek almost smiled. Consider it delivered retroactively. Ortega's radio crackled with updates. The shooter had been neutralized, but 2 more had opened fire from different positions. Local SWAT was 10 minutes out. Hospital security was in full lockdown. Every exit was either covered by shooters or blocked by the chaos of evacuation. We're sitting ducks here, Webb said, his medical training warring with tactical reality. Derek can't move fast enough to evade. The gurney makes us a target. We need a different strategy. We need information, Lauren turned to Ortega. Kane sent that message. He wanted us to know he's coming. Why telegraph your attack unless you want your target to react in a specific way? Ortega's eyes narrowed. You think this is a diversion? I think Kane's been playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. The shooting, the power failure, all of this, Lauren gestured at the chaos around them. It's too obvious, too loud. Kane spent 12 years staying invisible. Why go loud now unless the loud part is cover for something quieter? Derek caught on immediately. The evidence. He's not here for us. He's here for Webb's records, the files that prove the conspiracy, which are already uploaded to federal servers, Webb pointed out. He can't erase those, but he can cast doubt on their authenticity if the original source is compromised. Lauren's mind raced through scenarios. If Webb dies in a shootout, defense attorneys will spend years arguing the records were fabricated by someone with an agenda against Caldwell, without a living witness to verify chain of custody. The case falls apart, Ortega finished. Son of a bitch. He's not trying to escape justice. He's trying to poison the evidence so thoroughly that no jury will convict. A new sound cut through the gunfire, the sharp crack of flashbangs detonating in sequence. Smoke poured through the parking garage's ventilation system. Someone had planned this with military precision. SWAT? One of the agents called hopefully. SWAT doesn't use smoke without announcing, Ortega said grimly. That's not rescue. That's infiltration. The red emergency lights flickered and died. Now they had nothing but muzzle flashes and the distant glow of streetlights filtering through the exit ramp. Lauren's combat training kicked into overdrive. Her hearing sharpened, her peripheral vision expanded, every sense heightened by the kind of adrenaline that kept soldiers alive in places where visibility dropped to zero. Webb, stay on the gurney with Derek, she ordered. Everyone else, weapons ready. They're coming through the smoke. You're not armed, Ortega pointed out. I was a combat medic. Trust me, I'm never unarmed. She'd already assessed the gurney's equipment, IV poles that could become improvised weapons, medical scissors sharp enough to cut through clothing or flesh, the portable defibrillator that could deliver enough voltage to drop an adult male. Not ideal, but better than nothing. Shapes moved through the smoke. Professional. Too coordinated to be panicked hospital staff. The agents opened fire and the shapes dropped back, but Lauren saw what the others missed. Flanking movement, someone circling wide while everyone focused on the frontal assault. She grabbed the IV pole and moved silent through the smoke toward the flanker's position. Years fell away and she was back in Helmand province, moving through dust storms with nothing but instinct and training keeping her alive. The flanker emerged from the smoke 3 feet away, weapon raised toward Webb's position. Lauren swung the IV pole like a staff and connected with his wrist. Bones cracked. The weapon fell. She followed through with a strike to the temple that dropped him cold. Southeast flank clear, she called out, already stripping the fallen man's gear. Tactical vest, sidearm, spare magazines. She pulled on the vest and checked the weapon, loaded and ready. Where the hell did you learn to do that? Webb shouted. I learned a lot of things in the desert that don't make it into nursing textbooks. More shapes in the smoke, more gunfire. The agents were holding position, but barely. This wasn't random violence. This was a professional extraction team executing a coordinated assault on federal officers. Then Lauren heard it, the sound that made her blood freeze, a helicopter's rotors getting closer, not police or hospital medevac, wrong acoustic signature. He's got air support, she shouted over the chaos. Kane's not trying to take us here. He's trying to extract someone. Who? Ortega demanded. The answer came in the form of an explosion that blew out the garage's north wall, not large enough to collapse the structure, but big enough to create an opening. And through that opening, rappelling down with military precision, came 4 more contractors in full tactical gear. They weren't shooting at the FBI agents. They were moving directly toward the secured area where hospital security was holding Caldwell and the other arrested conspirators. He's not after us, Derek said with sudden clarity. He's after Caldwell, the one person who knows where all the bodies are buried, who can testify against him. Kane's not here to destroy evidence. He's here to eliminate the witnesses who can verify it. Or extract them before they can testify, Lauren added. Dead witnesses can't talk, but rescued conspirators can disappear to countries without extradition treaties. Ortega was already shouting orders into her radio, redirecting agents to the holding area. But the smoke, the chaos, the carefully orchestrated confusion, it was all designed to create exactly this kind of tactical breakdown where nobody knew who was supposed to be where. The helicopter descended into the opening Kane's team had created. Lauren could see it now through the smoke, a civilian transport painted black, no identifying marks. The kind of aircraft that moved through international airspace without drawing attention. "We have to stop them," she said. "If Caldwell gets on that helicopter—" "You're a nurse with a stolen sidearm," Ortega interrupted. "You're not tactical. I was Army combat infantry before I was a medic, and right now I'm the only person here who's actually fought these kinds of operations from the ground level." Lauren met the agent's eyes. "You can court-martial me later. Right now, either back me up or stay out of my way." She didn't wait for permission. She ran toward the extraction point, using the smoke for cover, moving with the muscle memory of someone who'd spent months navigating hostile territory. Behind her, she heard Ortega swear and then the sound of boots following. They reached the holding area as Kane's team was cutting through the temporary restraints. Caldwell was on his feet, flanked by two contractors who were moving him toward the helicopter. His face was set in grim determination, a man who'd gambled everything and somehow found a way to stay in the game. "Caldwell!" Lauren's voice cut through the rotor wash and chaos. "It's over! Even if you run, the evidence is already out there. The testimony is recorded. You can't erase what's been done." He turned to look at her, and for a moment she saw something almost like regret cross his face. "You should have stayed invisible, Hayes. Should have kept being the scared little medic who hid behind name changes and buried trauma." His voice carried over the noise. "Instead, you had to be a hero, and heroes always pay the price." One of the contractors raised a weapon toward her. Time seemed to slow. Lauren saw the movement, recognized the threat, calculated her options in the fraction of a second before death. Then Derek Holloway's voice roared across the parking garage with the authority of a man who'd commanded troops in combat zones. "Stand down!" Every head turned. Derek had somehow gotten off the gurney and was standing, barely, with Webb's support. His hospital gown was soaked with blood. His face was gray with pain and blood loss, but his eyes burned with the kind of fury that made trained killers hesitate. "You want to know why she wouldn't stay invisible?" Derek continued, his voice echoing off concrete. "Because 12 years ago she tried to save lives while you were busy ending them for profit. She held dying Marines in her arms while you sold their safety to the highest bidder. She earned her invisibility through trauma, and you lost yours through greed. There's no comparison." Caldwell's expression hardened. He gestured, and the contractors aimed at Derek instead. That's when the real SWAT team arrived. 8 officers rappelling through the blown-out wall, weapons trained, orders shouted in practiced coordination. The helicopter pilot saw them coming and tried to lift off, but Ortega had already coordinated with local air support. A police helicopter swung into position, spotlights cutting through the smoke, orders broadcast over loudspeakers that no aircraft was cleared for departure. Kane's contractors were professionals. They recognized a losing position when they saw one. Weapons lowered, hands went up. Within 90 seconds, the entire extraction team was on the ground in flex cuffs. But Caldwell stood frozen between capture and escape, his face a mask of dawning horror as he realized the carefully constructed conspiracy he'd spent years building was disintegrating in real time. "Where's Kane?" Ortega demanded, moving through the captured contractors. "Where's Victor Kane?" None of them answered. Professional soldiers knew the value of silence. Then Lauren's stolen radio crackled with a voice she didn't recognize, cold, measured, utterly calm, despite the chaos. "Agent Ortega, Lauren Hayes, Colonel Holloway. I believe we should talk." Ortega grabbed the radio. "Identify yourself." "You know who I am, and you know that arresting Caldwell and his hired help accomplishes nothing. They're middle management. I'm the architect." A pause. "I'm willing to negotiate the terms of my surrender, but only if certain conditions are met." "We don't negotiate with war criminals," Derek said, taking the radio from Ortega with shaking hands. "Then you'll never know the full scope of what Phantom Serpent was really about. You'll never know who gave the orders, who profited from the deaths, who's been running this operation from the shadows for 12 years. Kane's voice carried absolute confidence. "I have information that reaches into the Pentagon, into Congress, into corporate boardrooms you've never heard of. Information that will burn this conspiracy to the ground, if I choose to share it." Lauren felt ice crystallize in her stomach. "What do you want?" "Simple. Immunity for testimony against everyone above my pay grade, witness protection for myself and my family, and a guarantee that the full truth comes out, Not just the convenient parts that make good headlines, but everything. Another pause. You have 60 seconds to decide. After that, I disappear and take every classified secret with me. Your choice. The radio went dead. Ortega, Lauren, Derek, and Webb looked at each other in the smoke-filled ruins of the parking garage while sirens wailed and federal agents processed prisoners, and somewhere in the darkness, Victor Kane waited for an answer that would either expose the full conspiracy or bury it forever beneath layers of classification and political expediency. If we give him immunity, Webb said slowly, how many people does he get away with killing? If we don't, Ortega countered, how many other conspirators walk free because we can't prove their involvement without his testimony? Derek's hand found Lauren's. His grip was weak but steady. What do you think? He asked quietly. You're the one who started this. You're the one who risked everything to bring the truth into the light. So tell me, do we make a deal with the devil to expose the demons? Or do we stay pure and watch justice slip through our fingers? Lauren looked at the carnage around them. Federal agents wounded, contractors captured, Caldwell standing in handcuffs with the arrogance finally drained from his face. She thought about 5 Marines whose names were carved into her skin, about 8 veterans murdered in hospital beds, about 12 years of running from a truth that had finally caught up with everyone involved. Make the deal, she said. But I want to be in the room when he testifies. I want to hear every word, and if he leaves anything out, if he protects anyone who deserves to burn, the deal's off. Ortega nodded slowly and reached for her phone. That's when the second explosion tore through the parking garage, not from Kane's team this time, but from somewhere deeper in the hospital. And as debris rained down and new alarms shrieked warnings, Lauren's stolen radio crackled one more time with a voice that wasn't Victor Kane's. It was Agent Brenner. Sorry, Lauren, but some secrets are too dangerous to ever see daylight, and some witnesses need to disappear before they can testify. The line went dead as fire alarms screamed, and Lauren realized with horrible clarity that Brenner had just blown the evidence room where Webb's records were stored, along with every shred of physical proof that could corroborate their testimony about Phantom Serpent. Without the evidence, without the records, without anything but their word against a massive conspiracy backed by unlimited resources and political protection, they had nothing. And somewhere in the burning hospital, Brenner was erasing the last traces of truth that could have brought justice to the dead. The explosion's shockwave rattled Lauren's teeth and sent debris skittering across the parking garage floor. Somewhere above them, the hospital's fire suppression systems activated with a roar of water and chemical foam. But the damage was already done. Webb's carefully compiled evidence, the documentation that could prove 12 years of systematic murder, was burning in a room that Brenner had just turned into an inferno. No. Webb's voice cracked on the word. He started toward the hospital entrance, but Lauren grabbed his arm. You can't go in there, the structure could collapse. Those records are everything. Without them, we're just 3 people with a wild conspiracy theory and no proof. His eyes were desperate. We need those files. We need you alive, Derek said from where he'd collapsed back against the gurney. Blood loss was winning its war against his willpower. Dead witnesses help no one. Ortega was already coordinating with fire response, her voice sharp with controlled fury as she demanded to know how an FBI agent had accessed a secured evidence room without authorization. The answer came back in fragments over the radio. Brenner had used emergency override codes, claimed a national security threat required immediate document retrieval, and walked out with hard drives and file boxes minutes before the blast. He had this plan from the start, Lauren said, pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. The arrest, the safe house, the entire witness protection offer, all of it was theater designed to identify everyone who knew the truth and consolidate them in one place. So he could eliminate us all at once, Derek finished. His voice was getting weaker. Classic counterintelligence. Make targets think they're being protected while you position them for termination. Except we're still breathing, Ortega pointed out. If Brenner wanted us dead, that explosion would have been here, not in the evidence room. Because Kane's still in play. Lauren's mind raced through tactical possibilities. Brenner destroys the physical evidence, but he can't control Kane. If Kane testifies and corroborates our story, the conspiracy still gets exposed. So Brenner needs to deal with Kane first, either silence him or flip him. The stolen radio crackled again. Not Brenner this time. Victor Kane's voice carried a new edge, less confident, more urgent. Hayes, I'm sending you coordinates. You have 10 minutes to meet me alone or I disappear and you get nothing. That's a trap, Webb said immediately. Obviously. Lauren checked the stolen sidearms magazine, still half full. Not enough for a sustained firefight, but enough to make Kane think twice about betrayal. But he's scared. Brenner just proved that the FBI's compromised and evidence can be destroyed. Kane's realizing he's on his own with nowhere to run. All the more reason for him to eliminate loose ends before vanishing, Ortega argued. You walk into that meeting and you're giving him a clear shot. Or I'm giving him a reason to deal honestly because I'm the only person left who can verify his testimony. Lauren pulled on the tactical vest she'd taken from the contractor. It was too large but functional. Kane knows how this works. Dead witnesses can't corroborate stories. Live ones can rebuild cases from memory even after evidence burns. Derek tried to stand again and nearly passed out. Webb caught him and forced him back down while Lauren moved closer. Don't, Derek said through gritted teeth. Don't go alone into a situation where you're outgunned and unsupported. That's how soldiers die. Soldiers die when they refuse to engage because the odds aren't perfect. She met his eyes. You taught your Marines to take calculated risks when the mission demanded it. This mission demands it. My Marines had backup and air support. Your Marines also had a medic who ran into kill zones to drag them out. I'm still that person, Derek, just wearing different clothes now. She squeezed his hand once. Besides, you're the one who needs backup. You're minutes from bleeding out, and we're in a parking garage where half the exits are blocked by fire response. She's right, Webb said quietly. He needs a hospital, a different hospital, preferably one that isn't currently burning and full of compromised staff. Ortega made a decision. I'm calling in regional support, agents from offices outside the local network who couldn't be on Brenner's payroll. They'll secure Holloway and Webb while we handle Kane. She turned to Lauren. You're not going alone. I'm coming with you. He said alone. And I'm saying you get federal backup or you get arrested for interfering with an ongoing investigation. Your choice. It wasn't really a choice. Lauren nodded and Ortega detailed 2 agents to maintain overwatch at a distance while she and Lauren made direct contact. Not perfect, but better than walking into an ambush with nothing but bravado and a half-empty magazine. The coordinates Kane sent led to an abandoned industrial site 3 miles from the hospital, close enough to reach quickly, isolated enough that gunfire wouldn't draw immediate attention. Lauren and Ortega approached on foot, using burned-out buildings for cover while their backup team established sniper positions with clear lines of sight. Kane was waiting in the shell of a warehouse, illuminated by a single battery-powered lamp. He looked nothing like Lauren expected, mid-50s, gray hair, cropped military short, face weathered by years in places where survival wasn't guaranteed. He could have been anyone's uncle or neighbor. Nothing about him screamed war criminal, until you saw his eyes, cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of anything resembling remorse. Hayes, Agent Ortega. He nodded to each of them like this was a business meeting instead of a potential execution. I appreciate the punctuality. You've got 5 minutes, Ortega said. Then my backup takes you into custody, whether you're talking or not. Your backup can try. Kane's smile didn't reach his eyes. But I didn't survive 12 years staying ahead of federal investigations by being easy to catch. I'm here because it serves my interests, not yours. Your interests involve not spending life in federal prison, Lauren said flatly. So talk. Tell us what Phantom Serpent was really about. Kane studied her for a long moment. You were there. One of the medics who treated the casualties. I remember the reports. Young Army specialist who pulled 3 Marines out of a burning vehicle while taking fire. They wanted to give you a medal, but you refused it. I didn't deserve a medal for failing to save 5 men. Those 5 men were never meant to survive. That was the point. Kane pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. Phantom Serpent wasn't a mission that went wrong. It was an assassination dressed as a military operation. The words hung in the air like cordite smoke. Explain, Ortega demanded. Blackstone Security Solutions had a problem. We'd been running protection contracts for convoys operating in Helmand Province, taking payments from both the U.S. military and local insurgent groups. Everyone got what they wanted. Military convoys got through safely, insurgents got paid to avoid high-value targets, Blackstone got rich. Classic war economy. Lauren felt sick. You were paying the people who were killing American soldiers. We were negotiating with them. There's a difference. Kane's tone suggested he genuinely believed that. But one insurgent cell got greedy, started demanding more money, threatening to expose the arrangement. They became a liability. So you had them eliminated using U.S. Marines as your personal hit squad, Derek's voice came through Lauren's radio. He must have convinced someone to patch him into their comm system. You fed false intelligence to Caldwell, knowing he'd pass it up the chain, knowing it would result in a military operation that would wipe out your problem. Caldwell knew exactly what he was doing, Kane corrected. He was on Blackstone's payroll before he ever deployed. He engineered the briefing to make the operation look like legitimate counterinsurgency while ensuring the Marines would walk into an ambush we'd carefully orchestrated. And the 5 Marines who died? Lauren's voice was ice. Were unfortunate casualties of war. Collateral damage. Kane said it like he was discussing budget overruns. But they served a purpose. Their deaths made the ambush look real, made the subsequent destruction of the insurgent cell look like justified combat operations instead of corporate assassination. You murdered them. Lauren took a step forward, and Ortega's hand on her shoulder was the only thing keeping her from reaching for her weapon. You deliberately positioned 5 men to die so your business arrangement could continue. I positioned them to intercept a threat that would have killed 30 soldiers if left unchecked. The math was simple. Kane met her fury with absolute calm. 5 lives for 30. That's a trade any commander would make. Any commander would have scrubbed the mission or called in air support. They wouldn't have lied to their own men about the threat level. Derek's voice carried across the radio, stronger now. Someone must have gotten him stabilized. You didn't make a hard choice. You made a profitable one. Kane shrugged. I made the choice I was paid to make. Blackstone had contracts worth hundreds of millions riding on eliminating that insurgent cell. Caldwell facilitated the operation. I provided the intelligence. The Marines executed the mission. Everyone played their part. What about the veterans who've been dying at Ridgecrest? Ortega asked. The suspicious mortality rates, the medication protocols, that wasn't collateral damage. That was cleanup. Kane's expression finally showed something, not remorse, but frustration at loose ends. After Phantom Serpent, 8 people knew the truth about what really happened, the briefing attendees. Over the years, most retired or transferred or died in normal military operations. But some stayed vocal, started asking questions, requesting file reviews. Caldwell was placed at Ridgecrest specifically to identify and neutralize anyone who might piece together the conspiracy. Patricia Donovan, the medical records administrator. Lauren's hands clenched into fists. She coordinated the kills. She coordinated medical care that happened to result in unfortunate complications. Nothing that would trigger investigation. Nothing that couldn't be explained as the tragic reality of treating veterans with complex medical histories. Kane pulled up files on his tablet. I have all of it. Every payment, every target, every falsified report. 12 years of systematic murder documented in excruciating detail. Why? Webb's voice joined the radio conversation. Why keep records if you're trying to hide crimes? Insurance. The people I work for, the ones above Caldwell, above Blackstone's executive board, they're powerful enough to make anyone disappear when convenient, including me. Kane's smile turned bitter. These files are my life insurance policy. Proof that if I die, everything gets released to every news organization and law enforcement agency simultaneously. Dead man's switch, Ortega said. Cute. Except you just told us it exists, which means we can seize it. You can try, but the system is automated and distributed across multiple secure servers with layers of encryption you'd need years to break. And it's triggered not just by my death, but by any attempt to arrest me without specific code words being entered every 6 hours. Kane looked at his watch. Which brings us to why I'm here. I'm tired. Tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of managing this conspiracy. I want out. but I want immunity and protection in exchange for full testimony. Against everyone involved, Lauren clarified, including whoever's above Blackstone's board. Kane's expression shifted to something almost like respect. You want the big fish, the politicians who authorize the contracts, the Pentagon officials who looked the other way, the corporate executives who profited while soldiers died. You want the whole rotten structure exposed. That's the deal, full disclosure or no immunity. Then you're going to need more than witness protection. You're going to need a complete restructuring of military oversight and congressional investigations that will take years. Kane tapped his tablet again. But yes, I'll give you everything. Names, dates, bank accounts, recorded conversations. Enough evidence to bring down a dozen high-ranking officials and corporations worth billions. Why now? Ortega asked. You've sat on this for 12 years. What changed? Brenner changed. Kane's jaw tightened. He was supposed to be my contact inside the FBI. Someone who'd warn me if investigations got too close, who'd redirect attention away from Blackstone's operations. But 3 months ago, he stopped following the script, started building his own case, cutting his own deals. He's not protecting the conspiracy anymore. He's trying to control it. For what purpose? Power, money, political leverage. Take your pick. Kane gestured at the burning hospital visible through the warehouse windows. Brenner just destroyed evidence that could have implicated him along with everyone else. Now he's free to position himself as the hero who exposed corruption while burying his own involvement. He'll arrest Caldwell, maybe grab a few mid-level Blackstone operatives, declare victory, and leave the real conspirators untouched. Unless you testify, Lauren said slowly, unless you expose Brenner's role along with everyone else's. Exactly. Which is why he's going to kill me the first chance he gets. Kane looked between them. So here's my offer. You get me into federal custody, real custody, not Brenner's version, and I hand over everything, all the files, all the codes, all the evidence you need to prosecute the entire conspiracy from bottom to top. Ortega pulled out her phone and made a call, spoke in low tones to someone on the other end. When she hung up, her expression was grim. I can get you into witness protection under another agent's authority, someone Brenner has no influence over, but it'll take 3 hours to arrange transport and secure facilities. 3 hours is too long. Brenner already knows I'm talking to you. He'll make his move before... The sniper round that punched through the warehouse wall missed Kane's head by 2 inches and buried itself in the concrete pillar behind him. Everyone scattered. Lauren rolled behind a pile of industrial debris while Ortega returned fire at the muzzle flash visible on a rooftop 300 yards away. Kane was moving fast for a man in his 50s, already halfway to an exit before the second shot rang out. "Backup team, report!" Ortega shouted into her radio. Nothing but static answered. Either they were dead or their communications had been jammed. "Brenner," Kane said, breathing hard from behind cover. "He's here, and he brought friends." More shots. Multiple positions now. Professional coordinated fire designed to pin them down while someone moved into position for the kill. Lauren recognized the tactic. It was the same one Kane's contractors had used at the hospital. "East exit," she called to Ortega. "It's our only clear path." They moved as a unit, Lauren providing cover fire with her stolen sidearm, while Ortega hauled Kane toward the exit. The older man was surprisingly spry, but not young enough to dodge bullets forever. They burst out of the warehouse into an alley lined with burned-out vehicles and found themselves facing 3 men in tactical gear. Not FBI, not Blackstone contractors. Something else entirely. Government-issue weapons, military-grade communications, the kind of clean-cut professionalism that came from special operations backgrounds. "Kane," the lead operator said calmly, "you're coming with us. Quietly or messily, your choice." "Who are you working for?" Ortega demanded, weapon trained on the lead man's chest. "People who don't appreciate loose ends." He didn't even glance at her. "You two can walk away. This isn't your fight." "Federal agents don't walk away," Ortega said. "Then federal agents die." He raised his weapon. The shot that rang out didn't come from him. It came from above, from a rooftop where a figure in hospital scrubs was leaning against an air conditioning unit, rifle braced, breathing hard but keeping the barrel steady despite obvious pain. Derek Holloway had somehow gotten out of the hospital, found a weapon, and climbed 6 stories to provide overwatch for people he barely knew. "Stand down," Derek's voice carried across the alley with absolute authority, "or the next shot goes through your skull instead of the wall next to it." The operators hesitated. Training warred with survival instinct. One man with a rifle shouldn't be enough to stop 3 professionals. But Derek wasn't just one man. Behind him, emerging from other rooftops and ground positions, came more figures. Veterans, some in wheelchairs, some on crutches, some scarred by burns or missing limbs. Marines from 3rd Battalion who'd somehow gotten word that their former commander was in danger. They weren't all armed. Most weren't trained for this kind of situation. But there were 15 of them, and the operators realized they were suddenly outnumbered by people who had nothing left to lose. "Lower your weapons," Derek said quietly. "Walk away. Or explain to your superiors why you started a firefight with wounded veterans in front of witnesses with cameras." Because, of course, several of the Marines were recording on their phones, live streaming to social media, making sure that whatever happened next would be seen by thousands of people in real time. The operators lowered their weapons and disappeared into the shadows with professional efficiency. They'd failed this mission and knew better than to compound the loss. Lauren sagged against the alley wall, adrenaline crash hitting hard. Ortega was already calling for backup, real backup this time, from agents outside Brenner's sphere of influence. Kane stood in the center of the alley looking at the assembled veterans with something that might have been shame if he'd been capable of feeling it. "You risked everything," he said to Derek. "For what? To save me?" "To save the truth," Derek corrected. "You're just the vessel it's traveling in." He climbed down from the rooftop with help from 2 Marines, moving like every step cost him. When he reached ground level, his face was gray and his hospital gown was soaked through with blood, but his eyes were clear. "Kane's going into federal custody," Ortega announced. "Real custody. I've got a deputy director from the criminal division en route with a full protection detail. Nobody touches this witness until he testifies." "And Brenner?" Lauren asked. "Brenner's being arrested as we speak. Someone uploaded his entire operational history to the Washington Post 30 minutes ago. Phone records, bank accounts, classified documents he shouldn't have had access to. He's done." Webb's voice came through the radio, shaky with relief. "That was me. I uploaded everything from the backup drives before the evidence room burned. Brenner didn't know I'd already copied the files to a cloud server using hospital Wi-Fi. Everything's preserved." Kane actually laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You people. You actually did it. You brought down a 12-year conspiracy with nothing but stubbornness and refusing to stay dead." "We're Marines," Derek said simply. "That's what we do." "I was Army," Lauren pointed out. "You earned the title when you bled with us." Derek's hand found hers and squeezed. "Welcome home, Specialist Hayes." The words broke something inside her. Years of running, years of hiding, years of believing she'd forfeited her right to be remembered as a soldier. Tears she'd held back for more than a decade finally fell. "Thank you," she whispered. Federal vehicles arrived with lights and sirens. Real agents this time, ones who handed Kane over to U.S. Marshals with orders to transport him directly to a secure federal facility under 24-hour guard. Ortega coordinated the handoff while Lauren helped Derek into an ambulance, the same one he'd escaped from hours earlier. "You're insane," she told him. "Climbing buildings with surgical wounds." "Calculated risk," he replied. "The mission demanded it." "Stop stealing my lines." He almost smiled. Then his expression turned serious. "They're going to want statements from all of us. Depositions, grand jury testimony. This is just beginning." "I know. And your name's going to come out, your service record, everything you've been hiding." I know that too. "So why do it? Why risk everything to expose a conspiracy that most people will never hear about?" Lauren thought about 5 Marines whose names were carved into her arm, about 8 veterans murdered in hospital beds, about 12 years of running from a truth that had finally caught up with everyone. "Because somebody had to," she said simply. "And it turned out I was the one in position to do it." Derek squeezed her hand as the ambulance doors closed. "Semper Fi, Hayes." "Hooah, Colonel." The ambulance pulled away into the night, carrying a man who'd finally found peace with the demons that had haunted him for over a decade. Behind them, federal agents processed the crime scene, while Marines dispersed back into the shadows of civilian life they'd temporarily left behind. Lauren stood in the alley with Webb beside her, watching the organized chaos wind down to mere disorder. "We should get checked out," Webb said. "You've got cuts and bruises everywhere, and I think I might have cracked a rib when they threw me into that chair." In a minute, Lauren was watching something, a figure approaching from the far end of the alley. Not threatening, just purposeful. Special Agent Sarah Ortega returned with her phone in hand and an expression Lauren couldn't read. "That call I just took," Ortega said carefully. "It was from the Pentagon. They want to talk to you. Something about classified testimony regarding other operations connected to Blackstone's contracts." Lauren's stomach dropped. "How many other operations?" "They wouldn't say over the phone, but the officer I spoke with implied Phantom Serpent wasn't isolated, that there might be a pattern of similar incidents across multiple deployments." Ortega paused. "They want you to consult on the investigation, review files, identify cases where casualties might not have been what they seemed. How long would that take?" "Months, maybe years." Ortega studied her face. "You'd be working with military investigators, intelligence analysts, people with clearances so high, I don't even know their job titles. It would mean leaving nursing behind, going back into the world you walked away from." Webb touched Lauren's arm gently. "You don't have to decide now." But Lauren was looking at the burning hospital in the distance, thinking about all the veterans who died in those beds, thinking about how many more might be dying in other hospitals, because nobody was asking the right questions. "Yes," she said. "I'll do it." "Lauren," Webb started. "I'll do it because if I don't, someone else dies while I pretend I can hide from what I know." She met Ortega's eyes. "When do they want me?" "Tomorrow morning. Pentagon briefing at 0800. Bring everything you remember about Helmand Province and prepare for a very long conversation about things that officially never happened." Ortega walked away to coordinate with other agents. Webb stayed close, his presence steady and supportive even though she could see the worry in his expression. "You're choosing the fight over the quiet life," he said. "I never had a quiet life, but just a life where I pretended the screaming was someone else's problem." Lauren rolled down her sleeve, covering the names tattooed there. "Those Marines deserve justice, all of them, not just the 5 from Phantom Serpent." "And what about you? What do you deserve?" She didn't have an answer for that. Maybe she'd never have an answer. Maybe some questions weren't meant to be resolved, just carried forward until the weight of them became bearable. They walked back toward the hospital, still burning, still surrounded by emergency personnel fighting to contain damage that went far beyond simple fire. Somewhere in that building, evidence of a conspiracy had been reduced to ash. But the truth had survived. The witnesses had survived. And tomorrow, Lauren Hayes would walk into the Pentagon carrying 12 years of buried trauma and classified secrets, ready to burn down every lie that had been built on soldiers' graves. She should have been terrified, should have been questioning this decision. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt since leaving the Army: purpose. Behind them, unmarked vehicles pulled away carrying Victor Kane toward a future of testimony and consequences. Ahead, the hospital burned like a beacon marking the death of secrets too dangerous to survive exposure. And in Lauren's pocket, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, just 3 words that made her blood turn cold. "Brenner is loose." Lauren stared at the message until the screen dimmed. 3 words that undid every victory of the past 6 hours. Webb saw her expression and moved closer. "What is it?" She showed him the phone. His face went pale. "That's impossible. Ortega said he was being arrested." Ortega said a lot of things. Lauren was already moving, scanning rooftops and shadows with the paranoia of someone who'd learned that safety was always temporary. "We need to find her. Now!" They found Ortega coordinating with federal marshals near the command vehicle. Lauren grabbed her arm hard enough to leave marks. "Brenner. Where is he?" Ortega's confusion looked genuine. "In custody. SWAT team picked him up at his apartment 20 minutes ago." "Check again." Something in Lauren's voice made Ortega pull out her phone and make the call. Her expression shifted as she listened, confusion becoming alarm, becoming cold fury. "The team that picked up Brenner reported directly to his supervisor, a supervisor who just went dark and isn't answering calls." Ortega's jaw clenched. It was a fake extraction. They pulled him out under the guise of arrest, and he's in the wind. With how much lead time? Webb asked. 30 minutes, maybe more. Ortega was already issuing orders to her team, but he's one man with limited resources. We'll have him in custody before... He's not one man. Lauren's mind raced through tactical possibilities. He's a decorated federal agent with 2 decades of contacts, safe houses, and contingency plans. He knew this could happen. He's been ready to run since the moment he decided to destroy that evidence room. Then where does he run? Webb looked between them. If every law enforcement agency in the country is looking for him, he doesn't run. He eliminates the threat. Lauren's blood turned cold. Kane's testimony is the only thing that directly implicates Brenner. Without Kane, it's just circumstantial evidence that a defense attorney can argue away. Webb's files prove the conspiracy, but Brenner can claim he was investigating independently, that he destroyed evidence to prevent national security leaks. Kane's surrounded by U.S. Marshals in an armored transport, Ortega said. Brenner can't touch him. Want to bet your career on that? Ortega didn't answer. She was already on the radio demanding status updates on Kane's transport. The response came back terse and professional. Convoy was en route to the Federal Detention Center, ETA 12 minutes, no incidents reported. He's fine, Ortega said, but her voice carried doubt. Lauren's phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time a photo. Grainy, taken from distance, but clear enough. It showed the armored transport carrying Kane, and it showed the route markers indicating the convoy was taking Highway 9 through the industrial district. Below the image, one line of text, "Wrong road. Brenner owns that route." That's not the approved transport corridor, Ortega said, already moving toward her vehicle. Kane was supposed to take the downtown route with full traffic support. Highway 9 is isolated, multiple ambush points, minimal surveillance. They piled into Ortega's SUV, Lauren, Webb, and 3 agents who looked young enough to still believe the system worked. The engine roared to life, and Ortega drove like she was still doing tactical training courses, pushing the vehicle to speeds that made civilian traffic scramble out of their way. "Who's sending you these messages?" one of the young agents asked Lauren. "Someone who wants this conspiracy exposed more than they want Brenner dead." Lauren checked her weapon. Still half a magazine. Not nearly enough. Someone who's been inside this operation long enough to know Brenner's contingencies. Kane has people loyal to him, Webb realized. Contractors who didn't get arrested, ones who decided burning everything down was better than protecting a sinking ship. The radio crackled with emergency traffic. Shots fired on Highway 9. Marshal convoy under attack. Officers down, requesting immediate backup. Ortega pushed the accelerator harder. They reached the ambush site 4 minutes later. The armored transport sat sideways across the highway, doors blown open by shaped charges. 3 Marshal vehicles were disabled, windows shot out, agents taking cover and returning fire at positions in the industrial buildings flanking the road. And in the middle of the kill zone, Victor Kane was being dragged toward a black SUV by 2 men in tactical gear. "That's Brenner," Ortega said, focusing her binoculars. "He's personally extracting Kane." "To kill him or flip him?" Webb asked. "Does it matter?" Lauren was already out of the vehicle, moving toward the firefight with the kind of calm that only came from having done this 100 times before. Either way, Kane doesn't testify and the conspiracy stays buried. Ortega grabbed her tactical vest. "You're not going in there. Watch me." "Hayes, that's suicide. You're a nurse with minimal combat training." "I'm a combat medic who pulled wounded Marines out of firefights while mortars landed close enough to feel the heat." Lauren met her eyes. "This is what I do. This is what I've always done." The scrubs were just camouflage. She moved before Ortega could stop her, using disabled vehicles for cover, advancing with the muscle memory of someone who'd learned that hesitation killed faster than bullets. The marshals saw her coming and provided covering fire, recognizing another professional even if they didn't know her credentials. Brenner had Kane halfway to his extraction vehicle when he saw Lauren approaching. For a moment, something like regret crossed his face. "You should have stayed hidden," he called over the gunfire. "Should have kept being the nurse nobody noticed. People keep telling me that. Lauren's voice was steady despite her racing pulse. Maybe I'm tired of being invisible to men who think power means never facing consequences. This isn't about power. It's about survival. Brenner had one arm around Kane's throat, the other holding a weapon pressed to the older man's temple. The conspiracy goes deeper than you can imagine. Pentagon officials, congressional oversight committees, defense contractors worth billions. You expose this, and the entire military-industrial complex goes to war to bury it. Good. Lauren kept advancing, weapon trained on Brenner's center mass. Let them come. Let them try to silence every veteran who knows the truth. Let them learn what happens when they underestimate the people they train to fight. You're one person. So were the Marines who held position at Belleau Wood against impossible odds. So was the soldier who stopped a massacre at My Lai. So is every person who decides that doing the right thing matters more than doing the safe thing. Lauren was close enough now to see the sweat on Brenner's face. Let him go. Can't do that. He's my insurance policy. Then you're going to have to shoot him in front of a dozen witnesses with cameras. Lauren gestured at the assembled law enforcement, all of them recording this standoff. Kill Kane, and you lose any chance of claiming you were trying to protect him. You become just another criminal who murdered a witness to save himself. Brenner's expression flickered. He was calculating odds, running scenarios, trying to find the play that let him survive this. I can offer you something, he said. The names of everyone truly responsible. The officials who authorized Phantom Serpent, the politicians who've been protecting Blackstone for decades, everything Kane knows and more, because I've been investigating this longer than he's been running from it. In exchange for what? Immunity, witness protection, a chance to disappear before the people at the top decide I know too much. His grip on Kane tightened. I'm not the villain here, Hayes. I'm just the only one smart enough to understand how deep this goes. You destroyed evidence, tried to eliminate witnesses, nearly killed a decorated Marine colonel to keep him from remembering the truth. Lauren's voice went cold. You're exactly the villain. You just convinced yourself otherwise because facing what you've become was harder than blaming the system. And what have you become? Brenner shot back. A trauma nurse who hides from her past because admitting she failed those Marines was easier than accepting that sometimes people die and there's nothing you can do about it? The words hit harder than bullets. Lauren felt 12 years of guilt and shame pressing against her chest. Every face she couldn't save. Every voice that still screamed in her nightmares. You're right, she said quietly. I failed them. I was 23 years old with 6 months of combat medical training, and I couldn't stop them from bleeding out in the sand. I've lived with that failure every single day since. Then you understand. I understand that failure is human, that making mistakes under impossible circumstances is something we carry and learn from. Lauren took another step forward. But what you did wasn't failure, it was choice. You chose corruption over duty. You chose murder over justice. You don't get to hide behind system failure when you actively made everything worse. Brenner's weapon trembled slightly. Behind him, his extraction team was pinned down by martial fire. His vehicle was blocked. Every exit was covered. He was out of moves and running out of time. Let Kane go, Lauren said one more time. Face what you've done, or die here proving that you never had the courage to be the agent you claimed to be. For a moment that stretched eternal, Brenner stood frozen between flight and fight. Then his shoulders sagged and the weapon lowered. Kane stumbled forward and marshals immediately tackled him to safety behind cover. Brenner stood alone in the middle of Highway 9, surrounded by law enforcement, all his carefully constructed protections stripped away. I want a lawyer, he said dully. You'll need a good one, Ortega replied, emerging from cover with handcuffs ready. You're facing enough charges to guarantee life in federal prison. They arrested him efficiently. No drama, no final speeches, just a broken man being processed into the system he'd spent 2 decades manipulating. His extraction team surrendered without resistance, recognizing a lost cause when they saw one. Lauren stood in the middle of the highway while emergency vehicles screamed past and federal agents secured the scene. Webb found her there, still holding her weapon, still scanning for threats that no longer existed. It's over, he said gently. Is it? She looked at the burning hospital visible in the distance, at the damaged vehicles and wounded marshals being treated by paramedics. Brenner and Kane are in custody. Caldwell's arrested. But how many others are still out there? How many other conspiracies are running right now because good people decided staying quiet was safer than speaking up? Probably too many to count. Webb took the weapon from her trembling hands. But tonight, you stopped this one. You dragged a 12-year-old conspiracy into the light and forced people to see the truth they'd been comfortable ignoring. That matters. Derek Holloway appeared beside them, escorted by 2 Marines who'd somehow convinced hospital security to let them spring him again. His face was the color of old paper, and he moved like every step cost him, but his eyes were clear and focused. I heard what you said to Brenner, Derek told Lauren, about failure and choice and carrying what we can't fix. Wasn't my finest speech. It was honest. That's rarer than you think. He held out a worn leather folder. These belong to the Marines who died in Phantom Serpent. Letters they wrote home, photos they carried, things that got sent back to families. I kept copies because I couldn't let them be forgotten. Lauren took the folder with shaking hands. Inside were 5 faces, young, alive, smiling at cameras before they knew what war would cost them. I don't deserve to see these. You deserve to remember them as people, not just names carved in guilt. Derek's voice was rough. You couldn't save them. I couldn't protect them. But we can make sure what happened to them means something. We can make sure their deaths force changes that prevent the next Phantom Serpent. How? By testifying, by consulting with the Pentagon investigation, by refusing to let 12 years of silence continue. He squeezed her shoulder. By doing exactly what you've been doing, speaking truth even when it terrifies you. 3 weeks later, Lauren stood in a Pentagon briefing room facing a panel of military investigators and Congressional Oversight Committee members. She wore her old Army dress uniform, the one she'd kept buried in the back of her closet, still bearing her combat medic insignia and bronze star she'd never wanted. She testified for 6 hours straight, named names, described operations, detailed every classified mission where Blackstone's interference had resulted in unnecessary casualties. Kane sat at another table providing corroboration. Webb appeared via video conference to present his evidence. By the time they finished, 4 Pentagon officials had resigned. 7 defense contractors were under investigation. Congressional hearings were scheduled for the following month. The conspiracy that had killed 5 Marines and 8 veterans was being systematically dismantled in full public view. Lauren left the hearing room exhausted and found Derek waiting in the corridor. He looked healthier now, color back in his face, surgical wounds healing properly under legitimate medical care. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I think we just started a war with people powerful enough to end careers." "Good. They've had it too easy for too long." They walked together through the Pentagon's maze of corridors until they reached the memorial wall. Glass panels etched with names of service members lost to various conflicts. Derek ran his fingers over 5 names grouped together. "They'll be adding a plaque," he said quietly, acknowledging that these Marines died due to intelligence failures and systemic corruption. Not much, but it's something. "It's everything," Lauren corrected. "It's their families finally knowing the truth. It's other soldiers understanding that asking questions isn't betrayal. It's duty." "What will you do now?" Derek asked. "The nursing license is technically still valid. You could go back to Ridgecrest once they rebuild." "The Pentagon offered me a position, consulting on veteran care oversight, investigating suspicious mortality patterns at VA hospitals nationwide." She looked at the names on the wall. "It means traveling constantly. No permanent home. Always digging into places where people want me to stay quiet." "Sounds dangerous." "Sounds necessary." She met his eyes. "Someone has to do it. Might as well be someone who understands both the medical side and the reality that some people prefer convenient lies over uncomfortable truths." Derek nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For how I treated you when we met. For dismissing you based on nothing but pride and prejudice and trauma I couldn't process. You were dying and scared and surrounded by people you couldn't trust. I've done worse under less pressure." Lauren managed a tired smile. "Besides, you made up for it by climbing a building with open surgical wounds to provide sniper support. That bought you considerable forgiveness." "I did that for selfish reasons. I needed to prove I could still be useful, still be the Marine who led men into combat." He paused. But watching you work, seeing how you handled everything with nothing but competence and absolute refusal to quit, reminded me that heroism isn't about rank or recognition. It's about doing what needs doing regardless of cost. They stood in silence for a long moment, two soldiers who'd found each other 12 years too late, but exactly when they'd both needed proof that the fight still mattered. "Stay in touch," Derek said finally. "When you're tracking conspiracies across the country and need someone who understands why you can't let things go." "Will do." "When you're recovering and need someone who understands that healing isn't linear and some wounds never fully close." They shook hands like the warriors they were, then parted ways into lives that would be harder but more honest than the comfortable lies they'd been living. Lauren walked out of the Pentagon into afternoon sunlight that felt somehow brighter than she remembered. Her phone buzzed with messages, job offers from advocacy groups, interview requests from journalists, threats from people who wanted her silenced. She ignored them all and opened her Photos app instead. Found the picture Webb had taken 3 days after the arrests. Lauren, Derek, and 15 Marines from 3rd Battalion standing together outside the rebuilt hospital wing that had been renamed for the 5 men lost in Phantom Serpent. They looked like what they were, survivors carrying scars and stories, refusing to let tragedy define them, choosing to fight for something bigger than individual comfort. The message below the photo was from Derek. "Semper Fi means always faithful, to truth, to justice, to the people we couldn't save. You earned that title. Welcome home." Lauren saved the message and started walking. She had a flight to catch, an investigation to begin, a new battlefield to enter armed with nothing but experience and stubborn refusal to stay invisible while injustice thrived. Somewhere behind her, the Pentagon continued its daily operations, strategy meetings and budget hearings, and classified briefings where powerful people made decisions that would echo through soldiers' lives. But now those decisions would be watched, questioned, challenged by people who understood that duty meant speaking truth to power, even when power preferred comfortable silence. Lauren Hayes had spent 12 years hiding from the young medic who'd failed to save 5 Marines in a desert on the other side of the world. Tonight she walked forward as that same medic, scarred, imperfect, still carrying names carved in guilt and memory, but no longer invisible, no longer silent. No longer willing to let anyone else die because speaking up felt more dangerous than staying quiet. The fight wasn't over, it never really ended. But for the first time since Helmand Province, she felt ready to keep fighting. Not because she believed she'd win every battle, not because she thought one person could dismantle every conspiracy, but because she'd learned what every combat veteran eventually understood. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's deciding that some things matter more than your own survival. And truth always mattered more than comfort. She climbed into the waiting car and let it carry her toward whatever came next, knowing that the young nurse who'd once been dismissed as too weak to understand sacrifice had just proved that real strength was never about who shouted loudest. It was about who refused to stop standing when everyone else sat down,